They said the Alpha King went mad the night he chose the wrong queen. They said he burned his own kingdom, searching for a woman who vanished into winter. They said his howls could be heard across 3 territories, a sound of pure anguish that made even the strongest wolves tremble. But they didn't know the truth. They didn't know about Seren Vale. The healer he swore was his true mate, the woman he betrayed in front of thousands, the secret he tried to bury beneath politics and poison. And they definitely didn't know what she was carrying when she disappeared. This is the story of an Alpha King who nearly destroyed everything for love, and the outcast healer who became the most powerful queen the wolves had ever known. Stay until the end to see how she transforms from a rejected mate into a legendary ruler. If you're watching from your city right now, drop a comment below and hit that like button. Let's see where our pack is watching from tonight. The stone citadel of Ironvale had never held so many wolves. Seren Vale pressed herself deeper into the shadows behind the marble pillar, her healer's cloak pulled tight around trembling shoulders. From her hiding place in the eastern gallery, she could see everything. The massive hall packed with representatives from every pack in the realm, the silver banners cascading from vaulted ceilings, the ceremonial torches burning with flames that seemed to dance with anticipation. Tonight, Alpha King Kael Draven would choose his queen, and despite every whispered promise, every secret touch beneath moonlit trees, every oath sworn in darkness, Seren knew she shouldn't be here. "You're a healer, not nobility," her mentor had warned her 3 months ago when rumors of the choosing ceremony first began to spread. "Whatever you think is happening between you and the king, it's not what you believe it to be." But Seren had believed. God's helper, she had believed every word that fell from Kael's lips during those stolen nights in the forest sanctuary. "You are my true mate. I feel it in every breath. The bond is real, Seren. When the time comes, everyone will know." Her hand drifted unconsciously to her lower abdomen, where beneath layers of wool and linen, a secret grew. A secret she hadn't even told him yet. A secret that made tonight's ceremony either the beginning of everything or the end. "Make way for the Alpha King!" The announcement crashed through the hall like thunder. Every wolf in the citadel dropped to one knee, heads bowed, as the massive oak doors at the far end groaned open. Kael Draven entered like winter itself, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark hair pulled back to reveal the sharp angles of a face that could launch wars or end them. He wore the ceremonial armor of his house, black steel etched with silver wolves, a fur cloak that seemed woven from shadows and starlight. But it was his eyes that held Seren frozen, those storm-gray eyes that had looked at her with such tenderness just 2 nights ago. "Find me after the ceremony," he had whispered against her temple as they lay tangled in the meadow grass. "I'll need you close when I make the announcement. My queen, my mate, my Seren." She had kissed him then, tasting promise and forever on his lips. Now watching him stride toward the throne with the entire kingdom's attention focused on his every movement, doubt coiled in her stomach like poison. "The choosing will now commence," declared Elder Voss, the ancient wolf who served as keeper of traditions. His voice carried across the hall with supernatural clarity. 3 candidates have been presented for consideration. Each represents a great house. Each brings strength, alliance, and honor to the throne. Seren's breath came shallow and quick. This was standard ceremony, the formal presentation before Kael would reject the political matches and declare his true mate. He'd explained it all to her. "It's theater, love. I have to go through the motions for the council, but the ending is already written. You are my choice. You have always been my choice. Lady Maris Thorn of the Warpacks." A woman stepped forward from the right side of the hall, and even Seren had to admit she was magnificent. Tall and warrior-built, with honey-colored hair braided in the style of the Northern Territories, Maris Thorn moved with the controlled grace of someone who'd been training for combat since childhood. Her house controlled the largest military force outside the King's own guard. An alliance with the Thorns would secure the eastern borders for generations. But Kael didn't love her. He loved Seren. Lady Helena Blackwater of the Merchant Guilds. The second candidate was dark-haired and elegant, her gown a masterpiece of silk and strategic display. The Blackwater family controlled the trade routes that kept the kingdom's economy flowing. Choosing her would mean wealth, prosperity, and political stability. But Kael didn't love her either. Lady Iris Moonshade of the Mystic Pax. The third woman emerged like mist-given form, pale and ethereal, with silver hair that seemed to glow in the torchlight. The Moonshade Pack was small but ancient, their bloodline touched by magic that most wolves had forgotten. Choosing her would bring supernatural power and prestige to the throne, but none of it mattered, because Kyle had already chosen Seren. Elder Voss turned to the king. Alpha Kale Draven, you have seen the candidates. Each has been presented with honor. Each awaits your decision. Who will stand beside you as Queen of Ironvale? Who will bear your heirs and share your throne? Who will unite the Pax under your rule? The hall fell into absolute silence. Seren's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it, the moment when Kyle would reject the political theater and speak the truth. She could almost hear the words he would say. There is another. A woman not of great houses or ancient bloodlines, but of true bond and destined fate. I choose Seren Vale, healer of the frontier, as my queen and mate. There would be shock, outrage even, but the mate bond couldn't be denied. Once he declared it publicly, once he showed them the mark that connected their souls. Kael's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts like a blade through silk. I choose Lady Maris Thorn. The words didn't make sense at first. Seren's mind rejected them, certain she'd misheard, certain the acoustics of the massive hall had somehow distorted his speech. But then the kingdom erupted. Cheers and howls of celebration crashed against the stone walls like ocean waves. Wolves stamped their feet and beat their chests in approval. The alliance with House Thorn was exactly what the military faction had wanted. The political implications were perfect, and Serene's entire world tilted sideways. No, this couldn't be. She watched as if from a great distance as Maris Thorn ascended the steps to the throne platform, watched as Kyle took her hand with a smile that looked carved from ice, watched as Elder Voss began the formal binding ritual that would make this official, that would tie the Alpha King to a woman who wasn't his true mate. The mark on Seren's left shoulder blade, hidden beneath her cloak, invisible to everyone but her, began to burn. It started as a warm tingle, the sensation she'd felt that first night Kyle had claimed her in the sacred grove. This is the mate mark, he'd explained, tracing the pattern that had appeared on her skin like silver lightning. It means our souls recognize each other. It means you're mine and I'm yours, forever. But now the mark felt like acid eating through her skin. Seren stumbled backward, her shoulders slamming into the marble pillar. Pain lanced through her body in waves that made her vision blur. This wasn't supposed to happen. The mate bond wasn't supposed to hurt unless it was being rejected, unless one mate chose another. No, she whispered, then louder. No, no, no! A hand clamped over her mouth. Seren jerked violently, but the grip was iron strong. She was pulled deeper into the shadows, dragged behind a tapestry that concealed a servant's passage. Her assailant was a woman, older, sharp-eyed, wearing the plain uniform of the palace healers. Don't scream, the woman hissed. I'm Mira, head of the healing ward. I know who you are, girl, and if you value your life, you'll stop drawing attention. The hand released her mouth. Seren gasped for air, tears streaming down her face as the burning in her shoulder intensified. He promised. I know what he promised. Mira's expression was grim. I also know what House Thorn did to ensure he'd break those promises. Through her pain, Seren focused on the older woman's face. What are you talking about? 3 days ago, the king fell ill. Fever, delirium, loss of his wolf consciousness. The court physicians said it was exhaustion from preparations. Mira's jaw tightened. It was poison, subtle, specifically designed to sever the connection between a wolf and his instincts. Without his wolf, the king couldn't feel the mate bond, couldn't remember why it mattered. The words hit Seren like physical blows. You're saying he doesn't remember me? I'm saying he was drugged into making a political choice instead of following his heart. Mira grabbed Seren's shoulders, her eyes blazing with urgency. House Thorn knew about you. They discovered the secret meetings, the bond. They couldn't let you become queen. You have no army, no wealth, no political value, so they removed you from the equation. The burn of the mate mark was spreading now, creeping down Seren's spine like liquid fire. She could barely stand. I have to tell him. I have to... Tell him what? Mira demanded. That he's been poisoned? That his new queen's family are traitors? He's surrounded by Thorn's people, Seren. The moment you reveal yourself, they'll kill you. And if you die... Her gaze dropped meaningfully to Seren's abdomen. What you're carrying dies with you. Seren's hands flew protectively to her stomach. How did you... I'm the head healer. I recognize the signs. Mira softened slightly. You're about 2 months along, aren't you? Twins, if I'm reading the aura correctly. Twins. The king's children. Growing inside her while he pledged himself to another woman in front of the entire realm. The burning reached Seren's heart, and she cried out despite herself. It felt like something essential was being torn away, like invisible claws were ripping through the very fabric of her soul. It's the bond breaking, Mira said quietly. Not completely. True mate bonds can't be fully severed, but damaged, badly. You need to leave Ironvale tonight. I can't just... You can, and you will. The older woman produced a small leather pack from beneath her cloak. Money, supplies, and a pass that will get you through the frontier checkpoints. There's a settlement called Red Hollow, 3 days' ride north. Remote enough that no one will ask questions. Go there. Hide. Survive. Through the tapestry, the ceremony continued. Seren could hear Kael's voice reciting the ancient vows, binding himself to Maris Thorn with words that should have been Seren's. I am his mate, Seren whispered brokenly. I carry his children. And if you stay, you'll be dead by morning. Mira pressed the pack into her hands. House Thorn doesn't leave loose ends. The moment they realize you are here tonight, they'll send assassins. Your only chance is to disappear completely. The pain in Seren's shoulder reached a crescendo, and she collapsed against the wall, gasping. The mate mark was burning itself out, leaving behind what felt like a gaping wound in her very essence. In the great hall, the crowd erupted in fresh cheers. The binding was complete. Kael Draven had a queen, and Seren Vale had nothing. Go, Mira urged, already pushing her toward the hidden passage. The servants' tunnels lead to the stable district. Take a horse, preferably one that won't be missed immediately. Ride hard, and don't stop until you reach Red Hollow. Why are you helping me? For the first time, emotion cracked Mira's stern facade. Because 30 years ago, I was in love with an alpha who chose politics over his heart. I was too afraid to fight for what we had. I watched him marry another woman, and I spent the rest of my life wondering, what if? She straightened Seren's cloak, her movements almost maternal. You're carrying the king's true heirs. That means something, even if the kingdom doesn't know it yet. Seren wanted to argue, wanted to charge into that hall and make Kael see, make him remember, make him feel the bond that was tearing her apart. But another wave of pain stole her breath, and she realized Mira was right. She was going to lose this baby, these babies, if she didn't get somewhere safe. The trauma of the breaking bond was already taking its toll on her body. If he asks, Seren started. He won't, Mira said bluntly. The poison will wear off in a few weeks, but by then the political marriage will be finalized. And even if he remembers everything, what can he do? He's bound to Maris Thorn now. Breaking that bond would destabilize the entire kingdom. So this was how it ended. Not with a dramatic confrontation or a passionate declaration, but with a quiet escape through servants' tunnels while the man she loved pledged his life to someone else. Seren took the pack, shouldered it despite the burning agony in her back, and stepped into the darkness of the passage. Behind her, the celebration continued. The kingdom rejoiced in its new queen, and no one noticed the shadow that slipped away into the winter night. Eid. The stable district was chaos. Servants rushing to accommodate the hundreds of visiting wolves, horses being fed and watered, guards changing shifts. In the confusion, no one paid attention to a hooded figure in healer's robes leading a plain brown mare toward the northern gate. Seren moved carefully, keeping her head down, her hand pressed against her stomach where the twins rested, unaware of the disaster unfolding around them. Every step sent fresh pain shooting through her shoulder, but she forced herself to keep moving. Just get to the gate. Just get beyond the city walls. Just survive. The frontier pass Mira had provided got her through the checkpoint without question. Apparently being marked as a healer traveling to tend to an outbreak granted certain privileges. And then she was outside Ironvale's massive walls, alone on a dark road with winter pressing in from all sides. Seren mounted the mare and turned north, away from the only home she'd ever known. Away from the citadel where even now her mate, her former mate, was probably dancing with his new queen. Away from everything. She rode for hours, pushing the horse harder than she should have, desperate to put distance between herself and the catastrophe behind her. The mate mark had stopped burning, but now it felt like a dead weight, a scar where something vital used to live. Dawn was breaking over the frozen hills when Seren finally allowed herself to stop at a small stream. She dismounted carefully, her entire body aching, and knelt at the water's edge. Her reflection stared back at her, too pale, too young, too broken. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the children growing inside her. "I'm so sorry. I believed him when he said—" The words dissolved into sobs that shook her whole frame. She cried for the love she'd lost, for the future that had been stolen, for the mate bond that lay in tatters. She cried until there were no tears left, until she was empty and hollow and barely functional. When she finally looked up, the sun had fully risen. And somewhere in the distant south, she felt it. A ripple in the damaged bond, a shockwave of emotion that shouldn't have been possible across this distance. Kale had realized something was wrong, but it was too late. Seren climbed back onto the horse and rode north toward Red Hollow, toward obscurity, toward survival. She rode toward a future where she would have to become someone new, someone strong enough to raise the Alpha King's children alone, someone who could bury her broken heart and build a life from ashes. The healer named Seren Vale would disappear into the frontier, and the woman who emerged would be harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous than anyone could possibly imagine. Red Hollow was exactly as remote as Mira had promised. A cluster of rough buildings huddled in a valley where 3 territories met, but none claimed responsibility. It was home to outcasts, exiles, and those running from pasts they'd rather forget. In other words, it was perfect. Seren arrived 5 days after fleeing Ironvale, half frozen and barely conscious from the combination of mate bond trauma and early pregnancy complications. She collapsed in the settlement's only inn, and when she woke 3 days later, the innkeeper, a gruff woman named Talia, was sitting beside her bed. "You were calling out in your sleep," Talia said without preamble. "Nothing specific, just pain. Lots of pain." Seren struggled to sit up. "I'm fine. You're pregnant, sick, and running from something bad enough to make you risk winter travel alone." Talia crossed her arms. "Fine isn't the word I'd use. There was no point in lying. I need to stay here, just for a while. I can work. I'm a healer. I can earn my keep." Talia studied her for a long moment. "We don't get many healers out here. Most prefer cities where the pay is better and the patient's cleaner." She paused. "You'll use a different name?" "Sarah," Seren said, pulling the alias from nowhere. Close enough to her real name that she'd respond naturally, different enough to avoid casual recognition. "Sarah North." "All right, Sarah North. You can stay. We need someone who knows how to set bones and stitch wounds. Frontier life is hard on bodies." Talia stood. "But understand this. Red Hollow is neutral ground. We don't take sides in pack politics. We don't report to any alpha, and we don't ask questions about people's pasts. You keep your head down, you work hard, you mind your business, you'll be safe here." Safe. The word felt foreign, impossible. But Seren, now Sarah, nodded. "I understand." "Good. Rest today. Tomorrow you start in the healing shed. And Sarah?" Talia paused at the door. "Whatever you're running from, I hope it was worth it." Alone again, Seren pressed her hand to her abdomen where the twins were growing despite everything. Worth it? She'd lost her mate, her home, her entire future, but she still had this, them. 2 lives that depended on her survival. "I'll make it worth it," she whispered. "I promise." The first few weeks in Red Hollow were survival incarnate. Seren threw herself into healing work with desperate intensity, trying to outrun the grief that threatened to drown her. She treated knife wounds from bar fights, mended broken bones from mining accidents, delivered babies in drafty cabins where the nearest doctor was 3 days' ride away. The frontier wolves were different from the polished courtiers of Ironvale, rougher, harder, less concerned with propriety or politics. They didn't care that she was young or female or pregnant. They cared that she could stop bleeding and ease pain. Slowly, she built a reputation, the healer who never flinched, the healer who could work miracles with limited supplies, the healer who asked no questions and expected the same courtesy in return. And slowly, so slowly she almost didn't notice, she started to heal herself. The mate bond never fully recovered. It remained a constant ache in her chest, a reminder of what she'd lost. But the sharp, burning agony faded to a dull throb that she could live with, function with. The pregnancy progressed. Her body changed. And on the night when she first felt the twins move inside her, tiny flutters like butterfly wings, Seren wept for joy instead of grief. "Your father doesn't know you exist," she told them, sitting alone in the small cabin she now called home. "And maybe he never will. But I know, and I'm going to love you enough for both of us." Winter deepened. Snow piled high around Red Hollow, cutting the settlement off from the outside world for weeks at a time. And in that isolation, Seren found something unexpected: peace. It was fragile and incomplete, built on denial and distance. But it was hers, until the rumors started. 3 months after her arrival in Red Hollow, a trader came through the settlement with news from the south. Wolves gathered in Talia's inn to hear the gossip from the kingdom's heart, hungry for stories of a world most of them had left behind. "The Alpha King's gone mad," the trader announced over drinks. "Absolutely feral. Started about 2 months back. He just snapped." Seren's blood went cold. "What do you mean, snapped?" someone asked. "Disappeared from the palace for days at a time. Comes back covered in blood and dirt, won't say where he's been. Deployed wolves across the entire realm searching for something, or someone. The new queen can't control him. The council's losing their minds. Crops are failing because he's neglecting his duties. Borders are collapsing." "Searching for what?" Talia asked, her gaze sliding briefly to Seren. The trader shrugged. "No one knows. He won't say. Just keeps sending out search parties with no clear objective. Some folks say he's looking for a woman. Others say he's lost his damn mind entirely." The conversation continued, but Seren couldn't hear it over the roaring in her ears. Kyle was looking for her. The poison had worn off. He'd remembered. And he was tearing the kingdom apart trying to find her. Part of her, the part that still ached with the damaged mate bond, wanted to run to him, wanted to reveal herself and end his suffering. But the larger part, the part that had learned to survive, held her frozen in place. "He chose Maris Thorn. He broke our bond. And even if he regrets it now, what can he do? He's married. He's bound. Going back won't change that." "You all right, Sarah?" Seren realized she'd gripped the table hard enough to turn her knuckles white. She forced herself to relax. "Fine. Just tired." The trader's news had unsettled everyone, though. If the Alpha King truly was going feral, if the kingdom truly was descending into chaos, it would only be a matter of time before the instability reached even remote settlements like Red Hollow. That night, lying in a bed with her hands on her swelling stomach, Serene made a decision. She would stay hidden, not out of spite or revenge, but because revealing herself now would solve nothing. Kyle was bound to another woman. The political marriage couldn't be broken without civil war, and Seren refused to be the catalyst for that kind of bloodshed. Besides, she had the twins to think about now. Their safety mattered more than her broken heart. "We'll be okay," she whispered into the darkness. "Just us. We don't need him." But even as she spoke the words, the mate bond in her chest pulsed with longing. And far to the south, in a palace she'd never see again, an Alpha King howled his anguish to an uncaring moon. 2 more months passed. The rumors from the south grew darker. The Alpha King had become violent, unpredictable. He'd torn apart his own council chamber in a rage. Wolves were fleeing the capital, afraid of their own leader's instability. And the search continued. Seren tried not to listen, tried to focus on her work, on her pregnancy, on building a life that didn't revolve around a mate who'd betrayed her. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. It was a cold evening in early spring when Seren first felt the presence in the forest. She'd been gathering herbs in the woods near Red Hollow, her pregnancy now obvious enough that she moved slowly, carefully. The twins were active today, tumbling and kicking, making her smile despite the ache in her back. Then every instinct she possessed screamed danger. Seren froze, her hand going instinctively to the small knife at her belt. The forest had gone silent. No birds, no small animals, nothing but the whisper of wind through bare branches. Something was watching her. She turned slowly, scanning the shadows between the trees. Nothing. But the feeling persisted, raising goosebumps on her arms. "I know you're there," she called out, proud that her voice didn't shake. "Show yourself." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a wolf stepped into view. It was massive, easily twice the size of a normal wolf, with fur like midnight and eyes that gleamed with far too much intelligence. One of the king's warriors, marked by the silver collar around its throat. Seren's heart stopped. They'd found her. The wolf shifted smoothly into human form, revealing a scarred man in his 40s wearing the insignia of the royal guard. He held up both hands in a gesture of peace. "Sarah North," he said carefully, "or should I say, Seren Vale." There was no point in running, not in her condition. Seren straightened her spine and met his gaze. "What do you want?" "The Alpha King has been searching for you for months." The warrior's expression was carefully neutral. "He sent teams to every settlement, every outpost, every frontier town. We've been instructed to find you and bring you home." "I don't have a home," Seren said flatly. "Not anymore." The warrior's eyes dropped to her swollen belly, and something like shock crossed his features. "Gods above, you're, pregnant." "Yes, with twins." Seren raised her chin defiantly. "The king's children, conceived before he chose another woman as his queen." "That's why he's searching." The warrior stepped closer, his voice urgent. "You have to understand, the choosing ceremony was a trap. House Thorn poisoned him, severed his connection to his wolf. By the time the effects wore off and he realized what he'd done, you were gone. He's been losing his mind trying to find you." The same story Mira had told her, and maybe it was even true. But it didn't change the fundamental reality. "He's married to Maris Thorn," Seren said. "That bond can't be broken without tearing the kingdom apart. So what exactly am I supposed to come home to? A position as his mistress, his secret shame? You're his true mate, a true mate he rejected in front of the entire realm." Bitterness crept into her voice despite her best efforts. "I'm sorry the king is suffering, but I won't go back just to make him feel better about his choices." The warrior looked pained. "My lady, please." "I'm not your lady. I'm not anybody's lady." Seren turned away, gathering her herb basket. "Go back to Ironvale. Tell the king you never found me. Let him move on with his political marriage and his perfect queen." "There are assassins." The words stopped Seren cold. The warrior continued grimly. "House Thorn knows about you. They've known from the beginning, and now that you've been missing for months, they're getting nervous. They've sent killers into the frontier to make sure you never surface, to make sure you and whatever children you might be carrying never become a threat to Lady Maris's position." Seren's hand went protectively to her stomach. "You're lying." "I wish I was." He moved around to face her. "We've intercepted 2 assassination teams already, but there are more coming. This settlement is remote, but it's not invisible. If we found you, they will too." Fear coiled in Seren's gut. Not for herself, she'd faced death before, but for the children. "What are you suggesting?" "Come back with us. Under the king's protection, you and your children will be safe. He'll find a way to handle the political complications, but right now your safety is his only priority." It was tempting, gods, it was so tempting, to have protection, resources, to not be alone, but Seren had learned something crucial during her months in Red Hollow. She was stronger than she'd ever believed, and she'd be damned if she'd run crying back to a man who'd shattered her heart just because the consequences of his actions were finally catching up to him. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "Give me 3 days." The warrior looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression must have convinced him it would be futile. 3 days. Then I'm coming back with more soldiers whether you agree or not. The king's orders are clear. Find you and keep you safe, by any means necessary. He shifted back into wolf form and disappeared into the forest. Seren stood alone in the clearing, her hand still pressed to her stomach where the twins kicked and rolled. "What do I do?" she whispered. "How do I protect you?" The answer came not from divine inspiration, but from the practical part of her brain that had kept her alive this long. She couldn't go back to Ironvale. The political situation would be impossible, and she refused to be anyone's dirty secret. But she also couldn't stay in Red Hollow if assassins were truly coming, which left only one option. She'd have to become strong enough that no one, not assassins, not the king, not House Thorn, could ever make her run again. She'd have to stop hiding and start fighting. And she'd have to do it soon, before her children were born and vulnerable. Seren walked back to her cabin with new purpose in her step. She had 3 days to prepare. 3 days to decide whether to face her past or forge a new future. 3 days before everything changed again. But this time, she wouldn't be the victim fleeing into the night. This time, she would be ready. The 3 days passed like water through cupped hands. Too fast, too precious, slipping away before Seren could fully grasp them. She spent the first day fortifying her cabin. Not physically. There was no point in reinforcing wood and stone against assassins who could shift into wolves and tear through walls. Instead, she prepared escape routes. A hidden pack beneath the floorboards containing money, medical supplies, and dried food. A secondary cache buried in the forest. Maps marking safe paths through the wilderness that most wolves wouldn't know existed. The second day, she visited every family in Red Hollow under the pretense of routine health checks. In reality, she was saying goodbye. These people had given her sanctuary when she had nothing. They deserved better than to become collateral damage when violence finally arrived. "You're leaving," Talia said bluntly when Seren stopped by the inn that evening. It wasn't a question. Seren didn't bother lying. "Trouble's coming, the kind that won't stop at me. The King's men. Worse, people who want to make sure I disappear permanently." Seren met the innkeeper's eyes. "I won't let Red Hollow burn because of me." Talia was quiet for a long moment, then reached beneath the bar and pulled out a worn leather holster containing a silver knife. "My grandmother's. It's killed 3 wolves and 2 bears. The blade's got mountain ash worked into the metal, burns like hellfire on shifter skin. I can't." "You can and you will." Talia pressed the weapon into Seren's hands. "You've saved half this settlement from infection and death. We don't forget that. And Sarah?" She paused. "Whatever name you're really running from, I hope you find a way to stop running." On the third day, Seren waited. She sat in her cabin with Talia's knife on the table and her hands on her swollen belly, feeling the twins move restlessly inside her as if they sensed their mother's tension. 7 months pregnant now, ungainly and vulnerable in ways that terrified her, but also stronger than she'd ever been. The pregnancy had awakened something in her, not just maternal protectiveness, but a deeper well of power she'd always kept carefully hidden. Magic. Most wolves had lost their connection to the old gifts generations ago, but Seren's bloodline carried something different, something her mother had warned her to keep secret. "Healers who shine too bright get noticed," her mother had whispered on her deathbed. And noticed healers get used up until there's nothing left. So Seren had always held back, used only the minimum magic necessary, never revealed the full extent of what she could do. But if assassins were coming, if her children's lives hung in the balance, she couldn't afford restraint anymore. As sunset painted the sky crimson, the warrior from the forest returned. He brought 3 others with him this time, all bearing the king's insignia. They approached her cabin openly, making no attempt at stealth. The scarred warrior, she'd learned his name was Commander Riker, knocked politely on her door. "Lady Seren, may we speak?" She opened the door but didn't invite them in. "I told you I'd think about it. I have." "And?" "I'm not going back to Ironvale." Before Riker could protest, she continued, "But I'm also not staying here. I'll accept protection, but on my terms." Riker exchanged glances with his men. "The king's orders. The king doesn't get to order me anywhere," Seren's voice hardened. "He lost that right when he chose another woman. If you want to keep me safe, you'll do it here, in the frontier, not by dragging me back to a palace where I don't belong. That's not sustainable. House Thorn has resources, then we'll need to be smarter than they are." Seren stepped fully outside, one hand resting on her stomach. "I'm a healer. Red Hollow needs healers. If you station guards here under the pretense of frontier patrol, no one will question it. And if trouble comes, we face it here, where I have the advantage of knowing the terrain." It was a gamble. She could see Riker weighing his loyalty to the king's direct orders against the practical reality of trying to force a heavily pregnant woman on a week-long journey south. Finally, he nodded slowly. 2 conditions. First, you let us establish a proper perimeter. No more living alone in a cabin at the edge of the settlement. Agreed. Second, if the situation becomes untenable, if we can't guarantee your safety here, you come south without argument. Seren hesitated, then nodded. If it becomes truly impossible to stay, yes. Then we have an accord. Riker's expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, Lady Seren, the king never stopped searching. He tears himself apart every day knowing you're out here alone. Then he should have thought of that before he married someone else, Seren said quietly. Now, if you're going to protect this settlement, you should know there are 17 families, 43 residents total, and the eastern approach has a blind spot near the old mill that needs watching. She spent the evening briefing Riker and his men on Red Hollow's layout, trying not to think about Kyle, trying not to wonder what he was doing right now, whether he truly was suffering, whether any part of him still felt the damaged bond between them. The twins kicked hard, as if reminding her they were the priority now, not their father, not the mate bond, just survival and preparation for the lives she'd brought into this world. That night, Seren lay awake listening to the sounds of Riker's men establishing watch positions around the settlement. She should have felt safer. Instead, dread pooled in her stomach like ice water, because somewhere deep in her bones, beneath conscious thought, she could feel it. The storm was coming, and it would be worse than anyone anticipated. The attack came 6 days later at the darkest hour before dawn. Seren woke to absolute silence, the kind of unnatural quiet that meant predators were near. Her hand found Talia's knife before her eyes fully opened, instinct overriding the fog of pregnancy-disrupted sleep. Then she heard it, a wet, choking sound from outside. She moved to the window as quickly as her ungainly body allowed, peering through the gap in the shutters. The settlement was wrapped in pre-dawn gloom, but her wolf eyes adjusted quickly. One of Riker's sentries lay crumpled near the water well, his throat opened in a spray of dark blood. Seren's heart lurched. She grabbed her cloak and started for the door, healer's instinct screaming that she could help, she could save him. The door exploded inward. She barely had time to throw herself sideways before 3 figures burst through the splintered wood. Assassins. She could smell the poison on their blades, see the cold professionalism in their movements. "Target acquired," one of them said into the darkness. Seren scrambled backward, her pregnant belly making her clumsy. The knife was still in her hand, but what good was one blade against 3 trained killers? "Make it quick," another assassin ordered. "Thorn wants confirmation by sunrise." They advanced on her with the casual confidence of wolves about to kill a rabbit. And something inside Seren snapped. She'd spent 7 months running, 7 months hiding her power, playing small, pretending to be helpless, 7 months letting fear dictate her choices. But these bastards had just murdered one of Riker's men, and they were threatening her children. The magic that Seren had kept carefully leashed her entire life erupted like a dam breaking. Light blazed from her hands, pure burning golden light that had nothing to do with healing and everything to do with fury. The assassins screamed, throwing up their arms against the brilliance, but it was too late. The nearest one caught the full force of Seren's power and simply combusted, flesh and bone turning to ash in seconds. The second managed to shift into wolf form, but the light followed him, burning through fur and muscle until nothing remained but scorched earth. The third assassin was smarter. He ran. Seren chased him 3 steps before her pregnancy stopped her, leaving her gasping against the doorframe. The light faded from her hands, leaving behind the acrid smell of burned flesh and the terrible knowledge of what she'd just done. She'd killed them. Not defended herself. Killed them. Reduced living beings to ash with magic she'd barely understood she possessed. "Sarah!" Talia appeared in the doorway, her face pale with shock. Behind her, Red Hollow was waking to chaos, lights blazing in windows, voices shouting, wolves howling in confusion and alarm. There were 3 of them, Seren gasped. "One escaped. He'll report back." "Never mind that." Talia gripped her shoulders. What in the frozen hell was that light? Before Saren could answer, Riker appeared with his remaining men, his face grim. We've got 5 dead, 3 of ours, 2 civilians. The assassins came in through the eastern approach, exactly where you said they would. They knew our positions. Because someone told them, Saren realized with growing horror. Someone from Red Hollow, someone who's been watching, reporting. A wolf's howl cut through the night, not from the settlement, but from the forest beyond. Then another and another. Riker's expression went deadly. That's not assassins. That's a war pack. How many? Talia demanded. At least 20, maybe more. Riker turned to Saren. They're not here to assassinate you anymore. They're here to burn Red Hollow to the ground and make sure no one ever finds your body. The settlement was in chaos now. Families spilling into the street, children crying, wolves shifting in preparation for a fight. They couldn't possibly win. Red Hollow had maybe a dozen fighters total, frontier survivors, not warriors. Against a trained war pack, they'd be slaughtered. We need to evacuate, one of Riker's men said urgently. Get the civilians to the caves. They'll just follow and pick us off in the tunnels. Saren's mind raced, weighing impossible options. The magic was still thrumming under her skin, begging to be released again. But could she control it? Could she protect an entire settlement with power she barely understood? There's another option, Talia said grimly. She was holding a hunting horn, the kind used to signal danger across long distances. We call for help. From who? Riker demanded. The nearest pack territory is 2 days away. Not pack territory, the exiles. A collective intake of breath. The exiles were legends in the frontier, wolves who'd been cast out from their packs for crimes ranging from murder to treason. They lived deep in the wild places, following their own brutal code. Calling them for help was like inviting wolves into a sheep pen and hoping they'd protect the flock instead of eating it. We don't have a choice, Saren said. Blow the horn. Talia didn't hesitate. The horn's sound split the night, 3 long blasts that echoed across the valley like a dying scream. Then they waited. The war pack emerged from the forest slowly, deliberately, 23 wolves in battle formation, their eyes reflecting the settlement's torchlight. At their head walked a woman in black armor, her face half hidden by a wolf skull mask. Saren Vale, the woman called out. House Thorn sends its regards. Surrender yourself, and we'll make the settlement's death quick. Like hell, Riker growled, his men forming a defensive line. The woman laughed. 4 guards and a pregnant woman against my entire war pack? This will be over in minutes. She was right. Saren could see it in the mathematics of violence. They were hopelessly outnumbered. Even if she unleashed her magic again, could she kill 23 wolves before they tore through Red Hollow's defenders? And if she tried and failed, her children would die. Everything would die. Final offer, the masked woman said. Come quietly, or we start with the children. Saren stepped forward, ignoring Riker's protest. She could feel the magic building under her skin again, desperate for release. But there had to be another way. Some solution that didn't end with... A howl erupted from the western ridge, then another from the north, then a dozen more from every direction, surrounding the settlement in a chorus of wild, feral sound that made even the war pack hesitate. The exiles had arrived. They came down from the hills like shadows given teeth. 30, 40, maybe 50 wolves with no formation, no coordination, no allegiance to anything but survival and violence. They were scarred, mismatched, deadly. And they positioned themselves between Red Hollow and the war pack with the casual arrogance of predators who'd forgotten how to fear. The largest exile, a massive gray wolf with one ruined eye, shifted into human form. He was old, weathered, with scars that mapped a lifetime of battles. Red Hollow blew the horn, he said in a voice like gravel. That means they're under our protection tonight. You want the girl? You go through us first. The masked woman's confidence wavered. This isn't your fight, exile. You made it our fight when you threatened our territory. The old wolf grinned, showing too many teeth. Now you've got a choice. Walk away or learn why we survive out here when prettier wolves don't. For a long, tense moment, the two forces faced each other across Red Hollow's main street. Saren held her breath, the magic still coiled and ready beneath her skin. Then the masked woman made her decision. Fall back, she ordered her war pack. This isn't worth the losses. The wolves retreated into the forest, but slowly, making it clear they were choosing to leave rather than being driven out. The exiles watched them go with predatory patience. Only when the last warpack wolf disappeared did the old exile turn to Saran. "You're the healer," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. The one the Alpha King's been tearing the kingdom apart to find." Word traveled fast, even in the frontier. Saran lifted her chin. "I don't belong to the Alpha King." The old wolf studied her for a long moment, his single eye taking in her pregnant belly, the scorch marks on her cabin floor, the trembling in her hands from channeling power she couldn't fully control. "No," he agreed. "You don't belong to anyone." He gestured to the other exiles. "We'll stay until dawn. Make sure Thorn's warpack doesn't try another run. After that, you're on your own." "Why help us at all?" Talia asked suspiciously. The old wolf shrugged. "Red Hollow's always been neutral ground. We respect that. Besides," his gaze returned to Seren, "something tells me this one's going to be important. Call it instinct." As the exiles took up positions around the settlement, Riker pulled Seren aside. "You can't stay here," he said urgently. "Tonight proves it. Thorn will send more assassins, bigger forces. Eventually, they'll succeed." "I know." The admission tasted like defeat. "But where can I go that's safer? Iron Vale's a trap. The frontier settlements are all vulnerable. The wilderness alone would kill me in my condition." Riker was quiet for a moment. Then, "There's one place. The king won't like it, but it might be your only option." "Where?" "The Sanctuary of the Moon Goddess. It's in the Shadow Peak Mountains, 3 days north. Ancient ground, older than any pack. No wolf, not even an Alpha King, can shed blood there without being cursed. If you can reach it, you'd be untouchable until after the children are born." Seren had heard of the sanctuary in stories, a temple complex maintained by priestesses who served the old ways, the magic most wolves had forgotten. It was said to be a place of absolute peace, where the moon goddess herself still walked during the full moon. It was also said that the path there was treacherous, guarded by trials that killed the unworthy. "I'm 7 months pregnant," Seren said flatly. "I can barely walk across Red Hollow without getting winded. How am I supposed to survive a 3-day mountain journey?" "You won't be alone. I'll take my men. We'll get you there safely." "And if Thorn's forces follow us?" "Then we kill them in the mountains where their numbers don't matter." Riker's expression was iron. "One way or another, Lady Saren, you're getting to safety, even if I have to carry you there myself." Saren looked around Red Hollow, at the families huddled in doorways, at Talia organizing cleanup crews, at the scorch marks where she'd killed 2 assassins with magic she still didn't understand. She'd brought nothing but danger to these people, and it would only get worse the longer she stayed. "How soon can we leave?" "Dawn. Pack light, just essentials. The path to the sanctuary doesn't forgive extra weight." As Seren turned to prepare, the old exile caught her arm. Up close, she could see that his scars weren't just from battle. Some of them were ritual marks, the kind given to wolves who'd committed unforgivable crimes. "Whatever you're carrying in that belly," he said quietly, "it's got power. I can smell it. Old power, like the stories our grandmothers told." He released her arm. "The Alpha King's children?" There was no point lying. "Yes." "Then you'd better survive, because those babies are going to change everything." He smiled, and for a moment she saw what he must have been before exile hardened him. "The frontier needs changing." Dawn came too quickly. Seren said her goodbyes to Red Hollow with a heart that ached. Talia pressed supplies into her hands and refused to accept payment. The families she'd healed over the months lined up to wish her well, to press charms and blessings into her palms. "You'll come back," Talia said fiercely. "When those babies are born and safe, you'll come back and tell us the whole damn story." "I promise," Seren whispered, knowing she might be lying. Riker and his remaining men, just 3 now, after the night's losses, formed up around her. They'd requisitioned a sturdy mountain pony for Seren to ride, though she hated the necessity of it. As they prepared to leave, a commotion erupted at the settlement's edge. A rider was approaching fast, a lone wolf in royal insignia, his horse lathered with sweat. He pulled up short when he saw Riker. "Commander," the messenger gasped. "Urgent dispatch from Ironvale, the Alpha King." He paused, glancing at Seren. "He's collapsed. 3 days ago. Won't wake. The court physicians say it's the mate bond. Something's wrong with his connection to Lady Saren. They're calling it a soul fever." Seren's hands went instinctively to the damaged bond in her chest. She'd felt strange pulses through it lately, moments of intense emotion that weren't her own. But she'd assumed it was just the pregnancy affecting her sensitivity. Now, looking at the messenger's grave expression, she understood. Kale was dying. The political marriage to Maris had damaged the mate bond, and her extended absence had made it worse. Now the connection was literally killing him, pulling him deeper into fever and delirium with every day that passed. "How long does he have?" Riker demanded. The messenger swallowed hard. "The physicians won't commit to a timeline. But, Commander, they say if the bond isn't repaired soon, he won't survive the month." All eyes turned to Seren. She stood frozen, one hand on her swollen belly, the other pressed against her chest where the mate bond pulsed with weak, erratic beats. Kyle was dying because of their separation, because she'd run and stayed hidden while he searched, because despite everything, the betrayal, the political marriage, the months of silence, the bond between them was real. And it was killing them both. "I can't go back to Ironvale," Seren said, her voice hollow. "Even if I wanted to save him, appearing at the palace pregnant with his children would start a civil war." "Then what do you suggest?" Riker's tone was carefully neutral, but she could hear the desperation underneath. He served the king. If Kyle died, everything collapsed. Seren's mind raced. The sanctuary was 3 days north. If she went there, she could give birth in safety, recover her strength. But Kyle would be dead long before that. Unless the bond can be stabilized without physical presence, she said slowly, remembering lessons from her mother about mate magic. If I can reach him through the connection, push enough of my own life force through to sustain him until the children are born, that would require enormous magical ability, Riker said, and enormous risk to yourself. "I know." Seren looked down at her stomach, feeling the twins moving inside her. "But he's their father. Whatever he did, whatever happened between us, they deserve to have him alive." The old exile who'd been listening from nearby laughed darkly. "You're going to save the mate who betrayed you while running from the family trying to kill you, all while 7 months pregnant with twins. Girl, you're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid." "Probably both," Seren admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." She turned to Riker. "Change of plans. We still go to the sanctuary. I'll need the sacred ground to amplify my magic. But along the way, I stabilize the bond. Keep Kyle alive long enough for me to give birth safely. After that," she paused. "After that, I'll decide what comes next." Riker looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. Instead, he just nodded. "Then we ride for the sanctuary, and pray we make it before Thorn sends another war pack." As they departed Red Hollow, Seren looked back one last time at the settlement that had given her shelter when she had nothing. The exiles were already melting back into the forest, their protection lifted with the new day. Ahead lay mountains, danger, and a magical gamble that could kill her as easily as save Kyle. But she'd made her choice. She would survive long enough to give birth. She would keep the Alpha King alive through sheer force of will and whatever magic ran in her blood. And then, when her children were safe and her body recovered, she would face the mate who'd betrayed her and the kingdom that had forgotten she existed, on her own terms, as her own woman. And if anyone, Thorn assassins, political rivals, or even the Alpha King himself, tried to dictate otherwise, they would learn exactly why you didn't corner a mother wolf protecting her children. The journey north began under a cold spring sun, and behind them, in a palace far to the south, an Alpha King thrashed in fever dreams, calling out a name that no one but the moon goddess could hear. The mountain path was worse than Seren had imagined. What Riker had called a trail was little more than loose scree and exposed rock face, carved into cliffsides that dropped away into mist-shrouded valleys. The pony they'd given her picked its way carefully over stones that shifted and clattered down into nothingness with every step. Seren gripped the saddle horn with white knuckles, her pregnant belly making balance precarious. Every jolt sent pain shooting through her lower back, and the twins seemed to protest the journey with increasingly violent kicks. "How much farther?" she called to Riker, who led the way on foot. "We're maybe a third of the way to the first way station." He glanced back at her, his expression tight with concern. "Can you continue?" She wanted to say no, wanted to demand they turn back, find an easier route, wait until after the babies were born. But the bond in her chest pulsed weakly, irregularly, Kyle's life force flickering like a candle in wind. "I can continue," she said through gritted teeth. They'd been traveling for 6 hours, climbing steadily into the Shadow Peak range where the air thinned and spring warmth became winter cold. Serene's breath came in visible puffs, and despite the heavy cloak wrapped around her, she couldn't stop shivering. "Commander," one of Riker's men called from the rear guard position. "We're being followed." Everyone froze. Serene twisted in the saddle, ignoring the protest from her spine. Below them, perhaps half a mile back, she could see movement on the trail, figures too distant to identify but unmistakably climbing in their direction. "How many?" Riker demanded. The guard, a young wolf named Tarek, narrowed his eyes. "At least 8. Maybe more hidden in the rocks." "Thorn's forces?" "Can't tell yet, but they're moving fast, faster than we can with Lady Saren in her condition." Riker cursed under his breath. "There's a defensible position about a mile ahead, a narrow pass where the trail goes through a rock formation. If we can reach it before they catch us, we can hold them off." "And if we can't?" Saren asked, already knowing the answer. "Then we fight them on open ground and hope the numbers don't overwhelm us." They pushed forward with renewed urgency. Saren urged the pony faster despite the dangerous terrain, her heart hammering as much from fear as from exertion. Behind them, the pursuers gained ground steadily. 20 minutes later, they reached the pass Riker had mentioned, a gap between 2 massive rock formations where the trail narrowed to barely 10 feet across. On either side, the cliffs dropped away into deadly falls. "This is it," Riker announced. "Tarek, Jonas, take positions on the high rocks. Seren, stay behind me. Marcus, watch our backs in case they try to circle around." The men moved with military precision, years of training evident in every action. Seren dismounted awkwardly, tying the pony's reins to a scraggly tree growing impossibly from the rock face. As she turned back, the first of their pursuers came into view. They were wolves, 8 of them in human form, armed with the kind of weapons that spoke of military training. But they didn't wear House Thorn's colors. Instead, their armor was plain, unmarked, the kind mercenaries wore when they wanted to avoid identification. "Professional killers," Riker muttered. "Thorn's getting smart. No insignia means no proof of who hired them if this goes badly." The mercenaries stopped just out of arrow range, studying the defensive position Riker's men had established. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man with a face like hammered iron, called out across the gap. "We don't want trouble with the Royal Guard. Hand over the woman, and we'll let you walk away." "Not happening," Riker shouted back. The mercenary leader shrugged. "Expected answer. We'll do this the hard way, then." He gestured, and his men began spreading out, looking for alternative approaches. Seren watched them with growing dread. Riker had 3 soldiers, the enemy had 8. The math was brutally simple. "Commander," Tarek called from his position in the rocks. "They're trying to flank us from the east ridge." "Jonas, shift to cover that approach." "Seren." Riker turned to her. "Can you use that magic again? The light from Red Hollow?" Saren looked down at her hands. She could feel the power there, coiled and waiting. But controlling it was another matter entirely. "I don't know. Last time it just erupted. I wasn't controlling it so much as surviving it." "Try. Because if they rush us all at once, we won't be able to hold them." The mercenaries attacked with brutal efficiency. 4 came straight up the pass while the others attempted to scale the cliffs on either side, using climbing gear to ascend what looked like sheer rock face. Tarek and Jonas fired arrows at the climbers, forcing them to take cover, while Riker and Marcus met the frontal assault with swords drawn. Seren pressed herself against the rock wall, trying to summon the magic. She closed her eyes, reaching for the power she'd felt during the assassination attempt. It was there, burning beneath her skin like banked coals, but when she tried to pull it forward, nothing happened. "Come on," she thought desperately. "I need you. The babies need you." Still nothing. Steel clashed against steel as Riker engaged two mercenaries simultaneously. He was good, better than good, but he was also outnumbered, and the enemy was fresh while he'd been climbing mountains for hours. One of the mercenaries broke past Marcus and charged directly at Seren. She scrambled sideways, her pregnant bulk making her slow. The mercenary's blade swept toward her exposed stomach and bounced off empty air with a sound like a bell ringing. Seren stared in shock. A faint shimmer surrounded her, visible only as distortion in the air. The mercenary stared too, equally surprised, then raised his sword for another strike. This time, when the blade connected with the invisible barrier, it shattered. The mercenary stumbled backward, staring at the broken weapon in his hand. Seren looked down at her stomach, where the twins were kicking frantically, and understood. It wasn't her magic protecting her. It was theirs. The unborn heirs of the Alpha King, already manifesting power from within the womb. "Tarek!" Riker's shout snapped her attention back to the battle. The young guard had been hit, an arrow in his shoulder sending him tumbling from his perch in the rocks. He landed hard on the trail, his head cracking against stone. Jonas abandoned his position to drag Tarek to safety, which left the eastern approach undefended. Three mercenaries immediately capitalized, swarming over the ridge and into the pass. Now Riker's men were truly overwhelmed, 6 enemies against 3 defenders, and one of those defenders was injured. Seren watched in horror as the mercenary leader engaged Riker directly while his men pressed the attack from multiple angles. She had to do something. The barrier around her stomach proved the twins had power, but she needed her own magic, needed to... Pain lanced through her abdomen like a knife. Seren doubled over with a gasp, one hand flying to her belly. Not labor. Please not labor. Not here. Not now. The pain subsided after a moment, but the message was clear. Her body was at its limit. The stress, the cold, the altitude, it was too much. "Fall back," Riker ordered, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. "We can't hold this position." But there was nowhere to fall back to. Behind them, the trail narrowed even further, becoming a ledge barely wide enough for single-file passage. Ahead, the mercenaries pressed forward with renewed aggression. They were trapped. The mercenary leader disarmed Marcus with a brutal strike that sent the guard's sword clattering over the cliff edge. As Marcus stumbled backward, weaponless, the mercenary reversed his grip and drove his blade toward the guard's heart. A wolf's howl split the mountain air. Everyone froze. The howl came again, closer now, echoing off the rock walls until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. Then another wolf joined the chorus, and another. From the cliffs above, massive shapes began appearing, wolves far larger than normal, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Seren counted 5, then 7, then lost track as more kept emerging from crevices and ledges that shouldn't have been able to support them. The mercenary leader's confidence cracked. "What the hell?" The largest wolf, pure white with eyes like liquid silver, leaped from an impossible height and landed between the mercenaries and Riker's men. When it opened its mouth, a woman's voice emerged, clear and resonant despite the wolf form. "You trespass on sacred ground," the white wolf said. "The path to the sanctuary is under our protection. Turn back or face the moon goddess's judgment." The sanctuary's guardians. Seren had heard stories, priestesses who could take wolf form even without the usual shifter bloodline, blessed by ancient magic that predated the packs themselves. The mercenary leader tried to bluster. "We're just here for the woman. This doesn't concern. Everything on this mountain concerns us." The white wolf's eyes fixed on him with predatory intensity. "You have 10 seconds to begin your descent. After that, we consider you hostile." For a heartbeat, Seren thought the mercenaries might actually be stupid enough to fight. But even professional killers recognized when they were outmatched. The leader gave a sharp signal, and his men began retreating down the trail. Only when the last mercenary disappeared from view did the white wolf turn to Seren. "You carry great power," the wolf said, those silver eyes seeming to see straight through flesh to soul. "And great burden. The sanctuary awaits, but the final approach is yours alone to walk." "I don't understand," Seren said. "I'm 7 months pregnant. I can barely—" The path tests worthiness, not strength. The white wolf began to shift, bones and muscle reforming into human shape. The woman who emerged was ancient, her face lined with centuries rather than mere decades, her white hair flowing to her waist. Your companions may escort you to the base of the final ascent. After that, you climb alone, or you don't climb at all. That's unacceptable, Riker protested. She's pregnant, injured, exhausted. The rules are absolute. The priestess's tone allowed no argument. The sanctuary has protected those who seek it for 3,000 years by maintaining absolute standards. If she cannot complete the final trial, she is not meant to shelter there. Seren wanted to argue, wanted to point out the insanity of expecting a heavily pregnant woman to climb anything alone. But looking into the priestess's eyes, she saw no cruelty, only the immovable certainty of ancient law. "How far is the final ascent?" she asked quietly. "From the base to the sanctuary gates? Perhaps 2 hours for a healthy wolf. For you..." The priestess paused. "It will take as long as it takes, but you must begin before sunset, or the path closes until the next moon cycle." Sunset was maybe 4 hours away, and Seren had no idea how much farther they had to travel before reaching this base of the final ascent. "Then we need to move," she said, straightening despite the pain in her back and the exhaustion weighing her limbs. "Now." Riker looked like he wanted to object, but something in her expression stopped him. Instead, he just nodded and helped her back onto the pony. The priestesses led them higher into the mountains, following paths that seemed to appear beneath their feet and vanish behind them. The guardian wolves ranged ahead and behind, silent sentinels ensuring no further attacks. They climbed for 3 more hours, ascending into regions where snow never fully melted and the air burned cold in Seren's lungs. The twins protested the altitude with increasingly violent movement, and twice more she felt contractions that weren't quite labor, but definitely weren't normal either. Finally, they reached a plateau where the trail ended at the base of a sheer rock face that stretched upward into clouds. "This is as far as we go," the white-haired priestess announced. "The final ascent begins here." Seren dismounted carefully and approached the rock face. Carved into the stone was a narrow stairway, more of a crack in the cliff than actual stairs, that zigzagged upward until it disappeared into mist. "You're joking," she said flatly. "The sanctuary protects only those willing to sacrifice for sanctuary." The priestess gestured to the stairs. "Climb, and you will find shelter. Refuse, and you may turn back." "She'll die attempting that climb," Riker said harshly. "Look at her, she's barely standing." "Then perhaps she should turn back." Seren stared up at the impossible ascent. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was suicide. She was exhausted, pregnant, and had been in pain for hours. The idea of climbing for 2 more hours, alone, was absurd. But behind her lay mercenaries, assassins, and the certainty of death. Above lay sanctuary, safety for her children, and the sacred ground she needed to stabilize Kael's dying mate bond. Really, there was no choice at all. "I'll do it," she said. "Seren," Riker started. "I'll do it," she repeated firmly. "I've come too far to turn back now." She approached the stairs, placing one hand on the rough stone. The rock was cold beneath her palm, and when she looked up, the distance to the top seemed impossibly vast. "The moon goddess watches those who climb," the priestess said quietly. "If your heart is true, she will guide your steps." Seren took a deep breath, said a silent prayer to any power that might be listening, and began to climb. The first 100 steps weren't too bad. The stairs were narrow and steep, but there were handholds carved into the rock, and Seren found a rhythm. Grip, step, breathe, repeat. After the first 100, her legs began to burn. After 200, her lungs felt like they were on fire. After 300, she had to stop and rest, clinging to the rock face with trembling arms. Below, she could see Riker and his men as tiny figures on the plateau. Above, the stairs continued upward into obscuring mist. "I can't do this," she thought. "It's too much." The twins kicked, hard enough to make her gasp. And through the damaged mate bond in her chest, she felt a pulse. Faint, irregular, but unmistakably Kael's life force, still fighting to survive. "He's dying because of me. The children will never know their father because I ran instead of fighting." Seren pushed away from the wall and kept climbing. 400 steps. 500. The world narrowed to stone and effort and the burning in her muscles. Her vision blurred with exhaustion, and more than once she caught herself swaying dangerously close to the edge. At 600 steps, another contraction hit, stronger this time, doubling her over with pain that stole her breath. She clung to the rock, waiting for it to pass, terrified that labor was actually beginning. When the contraction finally eased, Saren looked up and saw something that made her heart sink. The stairs didn't just continue upward. They crossed a gap, a section where the rock face had collapsed, leaving a span of perhaps 8 feet that had been bridged with nothing but a single wooden plank, ancient and weathered. "You have got to be kidding me," she whispered. The plank was maybe 6 inches wide. Below it, open air dropped away into mist-shrouded nothingness, and Saren would have to cross it while 7 months pregnant, exhausted, and potentially in early labor. She could turn back. No one would blame her. This was insane. But the mate bond pulsed again, weaker now, the gaps between beats growing longer. Kael was running out of time. Saren approached the plank on hands and knees, not trusting her balance to walk upright. The wood creaked ominously under her weight, and she froze, certain it would snap and send her plummeting. It held. She inched forward, moving with agonizing slowness. Don't look down. Don't think about the fall. Just focus on the next inch, the next handhold. Halfway across, the wind picked up. It buffeted her from the side, making the plank sway. Saren flattened herself against the wood, eyes squeezed shut, every muscle locked in terror. "Please," she thought desperately, "if there's any power listening, if the moon goddess is real, please don't let me fall." The wind died as suddenly as it had risen. Saren forced herself to keep moving. 3/4 across. Then finally, blessedly, her hands touched solid stone on the far side. She dragged herself off the plank and collapsed against the rock face, sobbing with relief and exhaustion. But there was no time to rest. Sunset was approaching. She could see the light changing, growing golden and slanted. If she didn't reach the top before dark, the path would close. Saren hauled herself upright and kept climbing. 700 steps, 800. Her body had moved beyond pain into a kind of numb automatism. Grip, step, breathe. Grip, step, breathe. At 900 steps, the stairs finally leveled out onto a broader ledge. And there, carved into the mountain itself, stood massive gates made of silver-white stone that seemed to glow with internal light. The sanctuary. Saren stumbled toward the gates, using the last of her strength. As she reached them, they swung open silently, revealing a courtyard beyond where priestesses in white robes waited. "You have reached sanctuary," one of them said, stepping forward to catch Saren as her legs finally gave out. "You are safe now." Saren wanted to respond, wanted to express gratitude or relief or something, but the moment the priestess caught her, everything that had been holding her together, fear, determination, sheer stubborn will, finally broke. She collapsed into the woman's arms, consciousness already fading. The last thing she remembered before darkness claimed her was the mate bond in her chest, pulsing with renewed strength, as if it recognized she'd reached sacred ground. And somewhere far to the south, in a palace wrapped in crisis, an alpha king's fever broke for the first time in days. Saren woke to warmth and the scent of healing herbs. She was lying in a bed far more comfortable than anything she'd experienced in months, covered in soft blankets that seemed woven from moonlight itself. Candles burned on nearby shelves, their flames dancing without any visible draft. "Easy," a voice said as Saren tried to sit up. "You've been unconscious for 2 days. Your body needed the rest." The speaker was a priestess, younger than the white-haired guardian, with kind eyes and gentle hands that pressed Saren back against the pillows. 2 days? Saren's hand flew to her stomach. "The babies are fine. Remarkable, actually. Most women in your condition wouldn't have survived that climb, but your children seem to have been protecting you." The priestess smiled. "They're strong. Takes after their father, I imagine." Saren relaxed slightly. "Where am I?" "The sanctuary's healing ward. You're safe here. Truly safe. No weapons can be drawn on these grounds without divine punishment. No violence can be committed. You and your children are under the moon goddess's protection now." For the first time in months, Saren felt the tight knot of fear in her chest begin to unwind. Safe. She was actually safe. "Commander Riker?" she asked, camped at the base of the ascent with his men. "They can't enter the sanctuary. It's for women only, but they're standing guard to ensure no one follows you up." The priestess poured water from a crystal pitcher. Drink. You're severely dehydrated. Seren drank gratefully, the cool water soothing her parched throat. As she lowered the cup, she noticed something odd. The mate bond in her chest felt different, stronger, clearer, as if the damage from Kael's choosing ceremony had partially healed. The sacred ground, the priestess explained, seeing her confusion. It amplifies magical connections. Your bond to the Alpha King is regenerating, though it won't fully heal until you're in his physical presence again. Is he... Seren couldn't quite finish the question. Alive. Stable. Word reached us yesterday. His fever broke shortly after you arrived here. The bond stabilization worked. The priestess's expression grew serious. But there's something you should know. The Alpha King felt it when you reached Sanctuary. He knows you're alive, and he's coming north. Seren's heart lurched. Coming here? But the Sanctuary is women only. He can't enter the grounds, no, but he's traveling toward the Shadow Peaks with an army, determined to protect you from whatever threats drove you to seek shelter. The priestess paused. He should arrive in approximately 4 days. 4 days until she had to face Kael. 4 days to decide what she would say to the mate who'd betrayed her and spent months tearing the kingdom apart searching for her. I need to strengthen the bond before he arrives, Seren said, pushing aside the emotional complications to focus on practical necessity. If seeing me in person fully repairs it, the shock could be dangerous given how damaged it's been. Can you help me prepare? The priestess nodded slowly. The sanctuary has rituals for bond work. But, Seren, are you sure you want to repair it? A true mate bond, once fully restored, can never be severed, not without killing both parties. I know. So if you strengthen this connection, you're binding yourself to the Alpha King permanently, even though he's married to another woman, even though he rejected you publicly. The priestess's gaze was penetrating. Are you prepared for that reality? Seren was quiet for a long moment, her hands resting on her swollen belly, where the twins moved in restless patterns. She didn't forgive Kael, didn't trust him, wasn't even sure she still loved him after everything that had happened. But these children deserved a father, and if repairing the mate bond would save his life and stabilize the kingdom enough that her children could grow up in peace. Yes, she said finally, I'm prepared. Then we begin tonight, under the full moon. The priestess stood. Rest until then. You'll need your strength. The day passed in a blur of preparation. Other priestesses came to examine Seren, checking the baby's positions, ensuring her body could handle the magical strain of the bond ritual. They fed her foods designed to strengthen her life force and dressed her in ceremonial robes of white silk. As sunset approached, Seren was led to a circular chamber at the sanctuary's heart, a room open to the sky. Its floor inlaid with silver patterns that glowed in the fading light. The white-haired guardian priestess waited there, along with a dozen others forming a circle around a central altar. The bond ritual requires you to open yourself completely, the guardian explained. No walls, no protection, no hiding. You must be vulnerable in ways most wolves never allow. The magic will find the damaged connection and repair it, but the process will be painful. Are you certain you wish to proceed? Seren thought about Kael dying in his palace, thought about her children growing up fatherless, thought about the kingdom descending into chaos. I'm certain. Then when the moon rises, we begin. The full moon crept over the mountain peaks like a silver eye opening. Its light flooded the chamber, turning everything ghostly and strange. The priestesses began to chant in a language Seren didn't recognize, something ancient predating modern wolf speech. The guardian priestess approached Seren and placed both hands on her chest, directly over the damaged mate bond. Open, she commanded. Seren dropped every mental barrier she'd built over the months of running and hiding. She let herself feel the full weight of her grief, her anger, her terror, her desperate hope. The emotions crashed over her like waves, threatening to drown her. The magic seized that vulnerability and dove through it, racing along the mate bond toward its distant anchor in Kael's soul. Pain exploded through Seren's chest. Not physical pain, but something deeper, the agony of a wound being cauterized and healed simultaneously. She screamed, unable to help herself, as the bond blazed with silver fire. And through that connection, impossibly, she felt Kael. He was in a tent somewhere, surrounded by the sounds of a military camp. The moment the magic touched him, he gasped and clutched at his chest, feeling the same burning intensity. Seren? His thought voice came through the bond, stunned and desperate. Is that you? She hadn't expected this, hadn't realized the ritual would open a channel for actual communication. But now that it was there, words poured out before she could stop them. You chose another woman. You broke us. I was poisoned. I swear to you I was poisoned. I never wanted... But you did. You stood in front of the entire kingdom and chose Maris Thorn. Because I couldn't remember you. The poison severed my connection to my wolf, made me forget why our bond mattered. By the time I realized what I'd done, you were gone. The pain in his mental voice was so raw, so genuine, that Seren wanted to believe him. But months of hurt had built walls that even mate magic couldn't immediately tear down. I'm carrying your children, she said. Twins. They'll be born in a few weeks. Silence. Then a wave of emotion so intense it nearly broke the connection. Joy, terror, wonder, and anguish all tangled together. Children. Our children. His voice cracked. Seren, where are you? Let me come to you. Let me protect you. I'm in sanctuary. Safe. Protected by magic older than the packs. Then I'll come there. I'll camp at the base of the mountain if I have to. I'll wait until... You're married to Maris Thorn. Seren forced the words out. How exactly is this supposed to work, Kael? What future is there for us when you're bound to another woman? I'll find a way. I'll break the political marriage. And start a civil war? She laughed bitterly. House Thorn won't accept being cast aside. They'll tear the kingdom apart. Then let them try. You're my true mate. You carry my heirs. Nothing else matters. Everything else matters. Seren's frustration boiled over. I won't be your secret shame. I won't watch you parade Maris around as queen while I hide in the shadows with your bastard children. They're not bastards. To the kingdom they are. To the law they are. And you can't change that without destroying everything. The bond ritual reached its peak, the magic blazing so bright that Seren could barely breathe. The priestess's chanting crescendoed, and she felt something fundamental shift in her chest. The damage was healing. The bond was repairing itself, weaving back together into something strong and unbreakable. I'm coming to you, Kael said through the connection. 4 days. Wait for me. I'm not promising anything, Seren replied. Just because the bond is repairing doesn't mean I forgive you. I know, but I'm coming anyway. The ritual completed with a flash of silver light that left Seren gasping and exhausted. The priestesses caught her as she swayed, lowering her gently to the floor. The mate bond in her chest no longer ached. It hummed with power and life, a connection so strong she could feel Kael's heartbeat as if it were her own. It's done, the guardian priestess said quietly. The bond is restored. You're truly mated now, permanently, unbreakably. Which meant that no matter what happened, no matter what choices she made, Seren would be tied to Kael Draven for the rest of her life. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, all she felt was a strange, exhausted peace. She was safe. The bond was stable. And in 4 days, she would face the mate who'd shattered her heart and decide once and for all what their future would hold. But first, she needed to survive childbirth. Because the twins, feeling the surge of mate magic, had decided it was time to make their entrance into the world. The first real contraction hit like a hammer blow, and Seren cried out, doubling over as her water broke in a sudden rush. The babies, she gasped. They're coming, now. The priestesses erupted into organized chaos, rushing to prepare for an emergency delivery. Seren was half carried to the healing ward, her mind spinning with the impossibility of the timing. Through the mate bond, she felt Kael's sudden spike of terror as he registered what was happening. Hold on, he sent desperately. I'm coming. Just hold on. But there was no holding on. The twins had their own timeline, and they were done waiting. As another contraction ripped through her body, Seren gripped the priestess's hand and did the only thing she could. She surrendered to the pain, the fear, and the inexorable process of bringing the Alpha King's heirs into a world that didn't yet know they existed. And somewhere in the mountains below, Kael Draven broke into a run, racing against time to reach the woman his soul recognized as its other half, even if his actions had nearly destroyed her. The labor lasted 18 hours. Seren had thought the climb to the sanctuary was the hardest thing she'd ever endure. She'd been wrong. This was agony distilled to its purest form, waves of pain that built and crested and crashed over and over, until time lost all meaning and the world narrowed to nothing but her body's primal struggle. Through it all, the priestesses remained calm, efficient, their centuries of experience evident in every movement. They gave her herbs to manage the pain, supported her through position changes, and spoke in low, soothing voices about how strong she was, how close the babies were. And through the mate bond, Kael was there. She could feel him running through the mountains, pushing his body past all reasonable limits. He sent waves of strength through the connection, sharing his wolf's endurance when her own reserves ran dry. When the contractions peaked and Seren thought she might actually die from the pain, she could feel his presence wrapping around her consciousness, like arms she couldn't see. "I'm here," he kept sending. "I'm with you. You're not alone." She wanted to hate him for the presumption, wanted to block him out, to prove she could do this without him. But pride was a luxury she couldn't afford when her body was being torn apart. So she let him stay. Let his strength bolster hers. Let the mate bond do what it was designed to do, tie two souls together so completely that physical distance became meaningless. Dawn was breaking over the mountains when the first baby finally crowned. "Push," the head priestess commanded, her hands steady and sure. "One more push, Seren. Your daughter is almost here." Daughter. The word gave Seren something to focus on beyond the pain. She bore down with everything she had left and felt the baby slip free in a rush of fluid and relief. The infant's cry split the air, strong, furious, utterly alive. "A girl," the priestess confirmed, laying the tiny, squirming body on Seren's chest. Perfect and healthy. Seren looked down at her daughter through tears she didn't remember shedding. The baby was impossibly small, her face red and scrunched with outrage, her tiny fists waving at the unfairness of being expelled into cold air. But even in that first moment, Seren could see Kael in her features, the sharp angle of her nose, the set of her jaw. Through the bond, she felt Kael's reaction to the birth, a tidal wave of emotion so intense it nearly knocked her unconscious. Joy, terror, wonder, and a fierce protective love that seemed to remake him from the inside out. "A daughter," he sent, his mental voice breaking. "We have a daughter." "We have 2 children, Seren corrected, feeling the second baby shift inside her. "And this isn't over yet." The priestesses took the firstborn to clean and swaddle her, and the contractions began again. But this time, Seren's body knew what to do. The process was faster, though no less painful. 30 minutes later, her son entered the world with a cry that rivaled his sister's. "A boy," the priestess announced unnecessarily, laying him beside Seren, strong and fierce like his father. The twins, a girl and a boy. Both alive, both perfect, both hers. Seren gathered them close, one infant cradled in each arm, and wept with exhaustion and relief and overwhelming love. "You did it," the head priestess said gently. "You survived childbirth alone, without the father present. Many wolves don't. Your strength honors the moon goddess." Alone. The word stung, even though it was technically true. Kael hadn't been here in body, but through the bond. "I wish I could have been there," he sent, his regret a physical ache. "I wish I could have held your hand, supported you properly, been the mate you deserved." "You were here enough," Seren admitted quietly. "I felt you. Let me see them. Please. Through your eyes." Seren hesitated, then lowered her mental walls slightly, allowing Kael to perceive through the bond what she was seeing. 2 tiny faces, one with wisps of dark hair like his, one with lighter hair that might turn auburn like hers. Eyes that were still unfocused, skin still red from birth, but undeniably alive and real. His reaction was immediate and visceral, a howl that she felt more than heard, carrying across the miles separating them. A sound of such pure joy and grief that every wolf within 10 miles would have heard it. "I'm almost there," he sent. 6 more hours, I'll be at the base of the sanctuary by midday." The priestesses helped Seren clean up, changed her into fresh robes, and settled her in a recovery room with the twins sleeping in a carved wooden cradle beside her bed. She should have been exhausted, and she was. But sleep wouldn't come. because in 6 hours Kael would arrive, and Seren had absolutely no idea what she was going to say to him. The morning passed in a haze of feeding attempts, diaper changes, and the surreal realization that she was actually a mother now. The twins were demanding but perfect, their tiny fingers gripping hers with surprising strength. The head priestess visited around mid-morning, her expression serious. "The Alpha King approaches with an army," she reported. "Not to attack. Our scouts confirm they're in defensive formation, but House Thorn has also sent forces north. They're converging on this location." Seren's blood went cold. "How many?" "Thorns brought approximately 200 soldiers, mercenaries mostly, but well armed." The priestess paused. "The king has 300, but they've been marching for days. They're exhausted and undersupplied for a siege." "So Thorn wants to trap us here." Seren looked down at the sleeping twins. "Use the fact that I can't leave the sanctuary with newborns to force some kind of confrontation." "It appears so, but there's more." The priestess's expression grew grave. "Lady Maris Thorn herself leads their forces, and she's demanding to speak with you." Of all the things Seren had expected, that wasn't one of them. "She wants to talk to me? Why?" "She wouldn't say. Only that she'll wait at the base of the ascent for 1 hour. If you don't come down to meet her, she'll consider it a declaration of war against House Thorn." "I can't go down there. The babies are barely 6 hours old. I can barely walk, and—" "Which is why I'll go in your place," a new voice said from the doorway. Seren looked up to find Riker standing there, his armor dusty from days of standing guard. Behind him she could see several of the guardian wolves who'd escorted them to the sanctuary. "Commander," Seren said, "you shouldn't be here. This is sacred ground. The priestesses granted me exception given the circumstances." He stepped into the room, his gaze immediately finding the cradle where the twins slept. Something softened in his harsh features. "They're beautiful, my lady. The realm's future, right there. A future that House Thorn wants to eliminate." Seren struggled to sit up straighter. "You can't negotiate with Maris. She'll kill you the moment you're in range." "Maybe. Or maybe she's realized that the king's been dying of mate bond sickness, and her political marriage is worth exactly nothing if he's dead." Riker met her eyes. "Let me at least hear what she has to say. We need to know Thorn's endgame." He was right, even though Seren hated it. "Fine, but take the guardian wolves with you, and if anything seems wrong, I'll retreat immediately." Riker bowed slightly. "The king should arrive within the hour. When he does, he'll want to see you. Are you prepared for that?" Was she? Seren looked down at the twins, then at the mate bond in her chest that now hummed with constant, unbreakable connection. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I suppose I'll find out." After Riker left, Seren tried to rest, but her mind kept spinning through possibilities, scenarios, confrontations. What would she say to Kael? What would he say to her? How did you navigate being permanently bonded to someone who'd hurt you so deeply? The twins woke hungry, and she focused on feeding them, grateful for the distraction. They nursed clumsily, still learning, but the simple act of providing for them centered Seren in ways nothing else could. She was still nursing the boy when she felt it, a surge through the mate bond so powerful it made her gasp. Kael had arrived. Through the connection, she felt his presence at the base of the mountain like a bonfire blazing in her awareness. He was pacing, desperate, barely restraining himself from attempting the ascent despite knowing he couldn't enter the sanctuary. "Seren," his mental voice was ragged. "Please, let me see you, even just from a distance." The priestess appeared in the doorway as if summoned. "The Alpha King requests an audience. There's a viewing platform on the sanctuary's southern wall where you could speak to him while remaining on sacred ground. He would be on the mountain path below, within earshot, but unable to enter." "How far is the platform?" "Perhaps a 10-minute walk. I can have the twins brought to you there if you'd like." Seren wanted to refuse, wanted to make Kael wait, suffer, understand what it felt like to be separated from something precious. But the bond pulled at her like a living thing, and she could feel his desperation as clearly as her own heartbeat. "All right," she said quietly. "Give me a few minutes to prepare."
"What?"
The priestesses helped her dress in clean robes and bound her still bleeding body with cloth to manage the postpartum recovery. They braided her hair back from her face and brought her a walking stick to lean on, since her legs still shook with exhaustion. When Saren finally emerged onto the viewing platform, a broad stone balcony that overlooked the mountain path, she found Kale waiting exactly where the priestess had said he would be. He stood perhaps 30 feet below and 20 feet distant, still technically on the mountain path, but close enough that she could see his face clearly. And what she saw there stole her breath. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. His face was gaunt, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion, and something deeper, a soul-level weariness that spoke of months of searching, suffering, and self-recrimination. The mate bond between them pulled taut, singing with the proximity, and Saren saw him stagger as if physically struck. "Saren," he breathed, his voice raw. "You're alive. You're here. You're—" His gaze dropped to her still swollen belly, then back to her face. "The babies?" "Born this morning, a girl and a boy, both healthy." She kept her tone carefully neutral despite the bond's insistence that she run to him. "Both carrying your wolf blood." Kale's knees actually buckled. He caught himself against the rock wall, his face a mask of overwhelming emotion. "Can I see them? Please, even just—" "They're sleeping," Saren cut him off. "And you've lost the right to make demands." The words hit him like blows. She watched him flinch, watched pain cascade across his features. But he didn't argue, just nodded slowly. "You're right," he said hoarsely. "I have no rights here. No claims. I just—" He drew a shaking breath. "I thought I'd lost you. For months I thought you were dead or dying or hating me so much you'd rather disappear than ever see me again. When I felt you reach the sanctuary, when the bond started healing," his voice broke. "I've never been so grateful and so terrified in my life." "You chose Maris Thorn." Saren forced the words out, needing to say them face to face. "You stood in front of the entire kingdom and rejected me. I was poisoned. I know, Riker told me. The priestesses explained, but Kael—" She gripped the balcony railing. "Even if the poison made you forget, the result is the same. You're married to her, bound to her by law and political alliance. That doesn't just disappear because you regret it now." "I'll break the marriage," Kael said fiercely. "I'll annul it. I'll pay whatever price Thorn demands. I'll—" "Start a civil war that kills thousands?" Saren shook her head. "I won't let our children inherit a kingdom torn apart by conflict." "Then what do you want?" The question emerged as a near shout, his control finally cracking. "Tell me what you want, and I'll make it happen. Anything. Everything. Just don't ask me to live without you because I can't. The bond won't let me, and even if it did—" His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I don't want to." Before Saren could respond, Riker appeared on the path below, his expression grim. "My king," he said urgently. "We have a situation." Kael turned to him with visible effort. "Report." "I met with Lady Maris as requested. She knows about the twins. Someone in the sanctuary has been sending information south. One of the priestesses is a Thorn spy." Every wolf on the platform went rigid. Saren felt the guardian priestess beside her stiffen with fury. "Impossible," the guardian said coldly. "We vet our sisters thoroughly." "She infiltrated 3 years ago," Riker interrupted. "Maris showed me proof, letters, detailed reports about everything happening here. They know the twins were born this morning. They know Saren's condition. They know the sanctuary's defenses." He met Kael's eyes. "And Maris has a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" Kael's voice was deadly quiet. "She'll withdraw all Thorn forces and acknowledge the twins as legitimate heirs." Riker paused. "If Saren publicly agrees to remain in the sanctuary permanently and never claim the title of queen," the words hung in the air like poison. "She wants Saren healed," Kael said flatly. "Hidden away where she can't threaten Maris's position, raising my children in isolation while I'm paraded around with Thorn's daughter playing queen." "Essentially, yes. Absolutely not." "There's more." Riker's expression grew grimmer. "If you reject the offer, Thorn will declare open rebellion. She's got the military pacts on her side. They've already started moving toward Ironvale. Within a week, you'll have a full civil war." Saren felt the blood drain from her face. Civil war. Exactly what she'd feared. Thousands dead, the kingdom torn apart, and her children growing up in a world consumed by violence, all because she existed, because Kael's wolf had recognized her as his true mate. There has to be another option, she said desperately. Some compromise that doesn't end in war or exile. If there is, I haven't found it, Riker admitted. Thorne's been planning this for months, maybe years. The poisoning, the forced marriage, the positioning of their military forces, it's all been leading to this moment. Through the mate bond, Seren felt Kael's rage building like a storm. His wolf was surfacing, barely contained, howling for blood and vengeance. I'll challenge her, he growled. Ritual combat. Winner takes the throne, loser dies. It's the old law. She can't refuse. She can and will, Riker said. Maris isn't stupid. She knows she can't beat you in single combat. That's why she's forcing a political solution instead. Kael looked up at Seren, his eyes blazing with gold as his wolf pressed close to the surface. Tell me what to do. I'll burn the kingdom to ashes if that's what it takes to keep you safe. And Seren realized with sudden, crystalline clarity that he meant it. He would actually start a war, damn the consequences, if she asked him to. Which meant the decision was hers. Stay in the sanctuary, accept exile, raise the twins in safety while the kingdom remained stable under Maris's rule, or fight for her place at Kael's side and watch the realm descend into civil war. She opened her mouth to answer, but before she could speak, a howl split the air, not from Kael's forces or Thorns, but from somewhere else entirely. The exiles. The old gray wolf who'd helped defend Red Hollow appeared on a ridge above the mountain path, and he wasn't alone. At least 100 exiles flanked him, rogues and outcasts who owed allegiance to no pack. Heard there might be a war starting, the old wolf called down, his voice carrying across the distance. Figured we'd come see which side offers better terms. Kael stared at him. The exiles don't take sides in pack politics. We don't take sides in normal pack politics, the old wolf agreed. But this isn't normal, is it? This is about a healer who saved Red Hollow, who survived impossible odds to protect her children, who's being told to disappear so some ambitious noble can keep playing queen. He grinned, showing too many teeth. We don't like ambitious nobles. What are you offering? Seren called down, her heart suddenly racing. Sanctuary in the frontier, not this mountain temple. Real sanctuary. Settlements where your children can grow up free, where no political marriage or civil war can touch them. The old wolf's single eye fixed on Kael. And if the Alpha King is smart, he'll realize he's got more than just his exhausted 300 soldiers. The frontier packs will back the true mate. All of them. Seren's mind raced. The frontier packs numbered in the thousands, scattered, disorganized, but numerous. If they united behind her claim, that would still mean war, Kael said roughly. Maybe. Or maybe Lady Maris realizes she's miscalculated. The old wolf gestured down the mountain path where a commotion was visible among Thorne's forces. Check your scouts' reports, Alpha King. I think you'll find Thorne's allies aren't as solid as she believed. Riker was already receiving signals from runners below. His expression shifted from grim to shocked to something almost like hope. The Western packs are withdrawing their support, he reported. They just received word that... He paused, reading the message again, as if not quite believing it. That the moon goddess herself blessed the twins' birth. The priestesses sent out formal declarations to every pack in the realm. The guardian priestess beside Seren smiled slightly. Did we forget to mention that? Our letters went out this morning, declaring that Seren Vale underwent the sacred trials, reached sanctuary, and gave birth under the moon goddess's direct protection. According to ancient law, that makes her children... She paused for effect. Divinely sanctioned heirs, above political dispute. Seren stared at her. You didn't tell me you were sending letters. You were busy giving birth. We took the liberty. The guardian's expression was serene. The sanctuary hasn't issued a divine blessing in 300 years. When we do, every pack in the realm is bound by oath to honor it. Down on the path, Kael had gone very still. You blessed my children, publicly, with the moon goddess's authority. We blessed Serene's children, the guardian corrected. The father's identity is irrelevant to divine blessing. But yes, any wolf who challenges their legitimacy now challenges the goddess herself. The implications were staggering. Maris could declare rebellion, could try to fight for the throne, but she'd be fighting against divine mandate. Most pacts wouldn't risk that kind of sacrilege. Riker was receiving more signals. 3 more pack alliances just declared for the twins. Thorn's forces are in chaos. Half of them are withdrawing rather than fight against a goddess-blessed claim. The old exile laughed. Looks like your civil war just got a lot less civil, Lady Maris. From somewhere down the mountain, Saren heard shouting, Thorn's commanders trying to maintain order as their alliance crumbled. The political marriage that had seemed so unbreakable was fracturing under the weight of divine intervention and frontier solidarity. Kael looked up at Saren, his expression raw with hope and fear. This changes everything. Does it? Saren's hand rested on the balcony railing. You're still married to her. The law still stands. The law can be changed. Annulment based on duress, fraud, and ishat, and Kael's voice gained strength, and the emergence of a goddess-blessed true mate with legitimate heirs. The council will have to acknowledge it. If Maris agrees, she won't have a choice. The old exile sounded positively gleeful, not with half her alliance deserting and the frontier pacts declaring for your children. She can accept annulment and keep her head, or she can fight and lose everything. It was happening too fast. An hour ago, Saren had been facing exile or war. Now the priestesses and exiles had somehow flipped the entire political situation on its head. Through the mate bond, she felt Kael's desperate hope, but also his understanding that the final choice was hers. What do you want? He asked again, quieter now. Not what's political expedient or strategically smart. What do you actually want, Saren? She looked at him. This alpha king who'd betrayed her and searched for her and nearly died without her. This mate whose bond to her soul was now unbreakable. This man who was father to the sleeping infants currently being carried onto the platform by priestesses. The twins were awake now, making small mewling sounds. Kael's gaze locked onto them with such intensity that Saren felt it through the bond, overwhelming love mixed with terror that he might never be allowed to hold them. I want them to know their father, Serene said finally. I want them to grow up in a kingdom at peace, not torn apart by war or political games. I want... She paused, forcing herself to be honest. I want to stop running, stop hiding, stop pretending I can survive alone when every cell in my body knows I'm meant to be with you. Kael's expression cracked open. Then come home. Let me fix this. Let me prove I'm worthy of the second chance the goddess herself seems to be granting. The annulment will happen. I swear it. He placed his hand over his heart. I'll go to the council today. Force their hand if necessary. Maris can keep her house's dignity by agreeing to annulment based on fraud. We both know she never wanted this marriage either. She was just following her family's ambitions. Saren wanted to believe him, but months of hurt had taught her caution. Prove it, she said. Go back to Ironvale. Navigate the politics. Secure the annulment. Show me that you can actually untangle this mess without starting a war. She straightened despite the pain in her body. And when you've done that, when I can return to the capital as your acknowledged mate rather than your hidden shame, I'll come home. The words settled between them like a contract. Kael bowed his head, acceptance and determination warring in his expression. How long? As long as it takes. The twins and I will stay here where we're safe. The sanctuary has already offered extended shelter. Saren glanced at the guardian priestess, who nodded confirmation. When the annulment is finalized and the political situation stabilizes, send word. We'll come. And if I can do it in a week? Despite everything, Saren felt a small smile tug at her lips. Then I guess you'll see us in a week. Through the bond, she felt his determination crystallize into something unbreakable. Kael turned to Riker. Send runners to the council. I want an emergency session convened within 2 days. Send word to the pack leaders that the Alpha King formally acknowledges his goddess-blessed heirs and requests annulment of the political marriage on grounds of fraud and duress. His voice hardened. And tell Maris Thorn that if she opposes this, I'll challenge not just her, but her entire house to ritual combat. All of them, one by one, until either they yield or I'm dead. Riker's eyes widened. My king, do it. As Riker hurried off to carry out the orders, Kale looked back up at Seren. May I... His voice cracked. May I at least see them clearly? Our children? Seren hesitated, then gestured to the priestesses. They brought the twins to the edge of the platform, holding them up so Kyle could see. His reaction was everything she'd expected and more. Raw emotion flooding across his face as he looked at the son and daughter he'd never expected to have. Through the bond, Seren felt his love for them blazing like a second sun, fierce and all-consuming. They're perfect, he whispered. Seren, they're perfect. They are, she agreed softly. And they deserve to grow up knowing both parents. They will. I swear it. Kale tore his gaze away from the twins with visible effort. 1 week. Give me 1 week to fix everything I broke. And then, he placed his hand over his heart again. Then I'll spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of being your mate. He shifted into wolf form, massive, dark, powerful, and raced down the mountain toward his waiting forces. Seren watched him go, one hand pressed to the bond in her chest. The old exile was still on the ridge, and he called up to her. Think he can pull it off? I don't know, Seren admitted, but I think he'll die trying. Good enough, the exile grinned. Frontier packs will be watching. If Thorn or the Council tries anything stupid, they'll have more than just the Alpha King to deal with. As the exiles melted back into the wilderness and Thorn's fractured forces began their retreat, Seren turned to the Guardian Priestess. Did you really receive a divine blessing for the twins? Or was that political maneuvering? The Guardian's smile was enigmatic. Does it matter? The result is the same. Your children are protected, the kingdom must acknowledge them, and the political marriage that should never have happened is crumbling. She paused. Though for the record, when you completed the sacred trials and gave birth on consecrated ground, the moon goddess's altar did glow with light we haven't seen in centuries. Make of that what you will. Seren looked down at the twins in their cradles, her daughter and son, already changing the realm's entire political landscape just by existing. What will you name them? The priestess asked. Seren thought about it. Names that would carry power, that would honor what they were and who they might become. The girl, Lyra, it means brave heart in the old tongue. She touched her son's tiny hand, and the boy, Ash, for the ashes we rose from to get here. Lyra and Ash Draven, the Alpha King's true heirs, goddess-blessed and frontier-backed, and in 1 week, if Kyle succeeded, they would change everything. 3 days passed in the sanctuary's timeless peace. Seren recovered her strength slowly, her body healing from childbirth while she learned the rhythms of caring for twins. Lyra was fierce from the start, loud, demanding, her cries echoing through the healing ward whenever she was hungry or uncomfortable. Ash was quieter, more watchful, his dark eyes seeming to take in everything with unnerving awareness for an infant. Through the mate bond, Seren felt Kyle's constant presence. He was in Ironvale now, locked in endless council sessions and political negotiations. She could feel his frustration when the old wolves resisted change, his determination when they tried to stall, his barely contained rage when House Thorn's representatives attempted to block the annulment proceedings. But she also felt his joy every time she opened the bond enough to let him sense the twins, their small sounds, their warmth, the way Lyra's tiny hand gripped Seren's finger with surprising strength. They're growing so fast, she sent to him on the 3rd night, as both babies finally slept after a particularly difficult feeding session. I'm missing it, came his reply, heavy with regret. I should be there, helping you, holding them, being the father they deserve. You're building them a kingdom where they can live safely. That matters too. The council met again today. We're close, Seren. So close. Just a few more votes and the annulment goes through. And Maris? A long pause. Then, she's cooperating, mostly. I think she realizes fighting this will destroy her family entirely. But her father is another matter. Lord Cassian Thorn, the ambitious patriarch who'd orchestrated the poisoning, the political marriage, everything. Seren had never met him, but she'd heard stories. A man who valued power above all else, who would sacrifice anyone to maintain House Thorn's position. Be careful, she sent. Desperate men do desperate things. I know. I've doubled my personal guard. Riker won't let me out of his sight. On the fourth day, a runner arrived at the sanctuary with urgent news. Saren was in the courtyard, taking advantage of the spring sunshine to let the twins get fresh air, when the guardian priestess approached with an expression that made Saren's stomach drop. What's happened? Lord Cassian Thorne has challenged the annulment in front of the full council, the priestess reported. He's demanding ritual combat. His champion against the Alpha Kings, winner takes all. If Kael's champion loses, the annulment is void and the political marriage stands. If Kael's champion wins, House Thorne accepts the annulment and withdraws all political opposition. That's insane. Kael won't agree to... He already has. The priestess's expression was grim. The challenge was issued publicly, in front of representatives from every major pack. Refusing would make him look weak, like he's afraid House Thorne is right about the marriage. Saren's hands tightened on the twins' cradle. When? Tomorrow at sunset, in Ironvale's ceremonial arena. The priestess paused. There's more. Lord Cassian has named his champion, a mercenary from the Blood Packs, famous for never losing a ritual combat. He's killed 17 opponents in sanctioned duels. And Kael's champion? Through the bond, she felt Kael's presence surge. He knew she'd received the news. His mental voice was steady, but underneath she could sense his worry. I'm fighting myself, he sent. I won't risk anyone else's life for this. You can't. You're still recovering from the mate bond sickness. You've been in political sessions for days with no rest, and I'm the Alpha King. This is my fight. It's suicide. Then I'll die making sure our children have a legitimate claim to the throne. His determination was absolute, immovable. I won't let Cassian Thorne's schemes win, not after everything we've survived. Saren stood abruptly, startling the priestesses attending her. I need to go to Ironvale. You're 4 days postpartum, the Guardian said. The journey would... I don't care. Saren's voice hardened with decision. If Kael is going to fight for our future, I'm going to be there. The twins too. Let the entire kingdom see what he's fighting for. The babies are too young to travel. Then we make them strong enough. Saren turned to face the priestess fully. You said the moon goddess blessed them. You said they carry divine protection. Prove it. Give them whatever blessing or magic will let them survive the journey, because I'm going whether you help me or not. The guardian priestess studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. The frontier healer has claws after all. She gestured to the other priestesses. Prepare the traveling cradle and fetch the ceremonial blessing oils. If the goddess-touched heirs are going to make their first public appearance, we'll ensure they arrive with appropriate power. The ritual took 2 hours. The priestesses anointed both twins with oils that smelled of moonlight and wild forests, chanting in the old language while silver light seemed to sink into the baby's skin. Lyra fussed through the entire process, but Ash watched with those unnervingly aware eyes, as if he understood exactly what was happening. When it was finished, the guardian placed her hand on each infant's forehead. They're protected now, she said. Not invincible, but strong. Stronger than any newborn has a right to be. The journey won't harm them. Thank you, Saren whispered. Don't thank me yet. You're walking into a political firestorm. House Thorne won't be the only ones shocked by your appearance. Half the council doesn't even know you exist. The priestess's expression was serious. Are you prepared for what happens when the Alpha King's secret mate and hidden children are suddenly revealed to the entire realm? Saren looked down at Lyra and Ash, both now sleeping peacefully despite the ritual that had just concluded. She thought about the months of running, hiding, surviving in shadows while Kael's political marriage played out publicly. No more hiding, no more shame. I'm done being a secret, she said quietly. Let them see us. Let them know the truth. They departed the sanctuary at dawn, Saren riding in a cushioned cart with the twins while Riker's men formed a protective escort. The guardian priestess sent 20 of her warriors as additional guards. The sacred wolves who'd helped defend them from the mercenaries now pledged to ensure Saren reached Ironvale safely. The journey that had taken days to climb took only a day and a half to descend. They pushed hard, changing horses at frontier settlements, stopping only long enough to feed and change the twins. Through the bond, Kael felt her approaching. What are you doing? His mental voice was equal parts shock and panic. You should be resting, recovering. I'm coming to watch you fight, Seren sent back firmly, and to make sure the entire kingdom knows exactly what they're voting on when they decide our future. Seren, it's not safe. If Thorn realizes you're here, then let them try something. I've survived assassins, mercenaries, childbirth in a mountain sanctuary, and months of your absence. I think I can handle political theater. She felt his emotions warring, fear for her safety versus fierce pride that she was choosing to stand beside him publicly. Finally, when you arrive, come directly to the palace. I'll have guards waiting at every gate. I'm not hiding in the palace while you fight. I didn't think you would. A pause, then softer. I've missed you. Missed seeing you, touching you, being able to do more than sense you through the bond. Win this fight, Seren replied. Then you can do all the touching you want. His laughter echoed through the connection, warm and real and tinged with the kind of anticipation that made her cheeks flush despite everything. They reached Ironvale as the sun was setting on the day before the ritual combat. The city was in chaos. Wolves from every pack in the realm had converged on the capital to witness the challenge, filling the streets until the markets overflowed and every inn was packed beyond capacity. Banners from a dozen different houses flew from buildings, though Seren noticed that very few bore House Thorn's colors. Word of their approach had preceded them. When Seren's cart rolled through the city gates, crowds lined the streets, thousands of wolves craning for a glimpse of the woman who'd upended their entire political structure just by existing. "Is that her?" someone shouted. "The true mate? I heard she's carrying the king's bastards." "Not bastards, they're goddess-blessed." Seren kept her head high and her expression calm, even as fear clawed at her insides. The twins were wrapped in blankets blessed by the sanctuary, but they were still terribly small and vulnerable. If the crowd turned hostile, the guardian wolves flanking her cart growled low, a warning that carried across the packed street. The crowd immediately fell back, giving them space. They were escorted directly to the palace, where Kael waited in the main courtyard with what looked like his entire personal guard. The moment Seren's cart stopped, he was there, pulling open the door before anyone else could reach it. Their eyes met, and the mate bond sang between them. 4 days of separation crashing into reunion with almost physical force. "You're here," Kael breathed. "You're actually here." "I told you I was coming." Seren accepted his hand to help her down from the cart, her body still sore but functional. "Did you think I'd let you face this alone?" "I hoped you'd stay safe." But his grip on her hand was tight, desperate, and she could feel through the bond how much her presence meant to him. "Where are they?" His gaze dropped to the cart. "The twins." "Sleeping, miraculously." Seren gestured to the priestess who'd been riding with her. "They've been blessed for travel, but they're still only days old. We need somewhere quiet to—" Kael had already moved past her to look into the cart where Lyra and Ash slept in their traveling cradle. He went absolutely still, staring at them with an expression of such overwhelming love and awe that Seren felt tears prick her eyes. "May I?" he asked hoarsely. "They're your children too." With shaking hands, Kael reached down and carefully lifted Ash. The boy stirred but didn't wake, making a small sound that might have been protest. Kael cradled him with the awkward gentleness of someone who'd never held a baby before, but was determined not to break this one. "He's so small," Kael whispered. "So perfect." Seren picked up Lyra, who woke immediately and began to fuss. "This is your daughter, Lyra, already fierce." Kael's eyes were bright with unshed tears as he looked between his children and their mother. "I can't believe they're real, that you're real, that I get to—" His voice broke. "Tomorrow," Seren said quietly. "Win tomorrow, and you get to hold them every day. Lose, and—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Kael's expression hardened with determination. "I won't lose. I can't. Not with this much at stake." They were given rooms in the palace's royal wing, a suite that had been hastily prepared with everything Seren and the twins might need. Servants brought food, supplies, and a cradle carved from ancient oak that Kael said had belonged to his own mother. As night fell over Ironvale, they sat together in Seren's chambers, Kael in a chair by the window, Seren on the bed, nursing Lyra while Ash slept in his cradle. It should have been peaceful. Instead, the air thrummed with tension about tomorrow's fight. "Tell me about Thorn's champion," Seren said finally. "The truth, not the political version." Kyle was quiet for a moment. "His name is Garrett Bloodprice. He's from the Northern Wastes, where wolves still practice the old ways, trial by combat for everything from territory disputes to marriage contracts. He's been fighting since he was 15. Never lost. Not once. And you?" "I'm good. Better than most. But I'm also exhausted, still recovering from bond sickness, and I haven't trained properly in months because I've been too busy searching for you." He met her eyes. "If this were a fair fight, I'd give myself even odds. But Cassian Thorn doesn't believe in fair fights." You think he'll cheat?" "I think he's desperate, which makes him dangerous." Kyle stood and moved to look down at Ash. "I've had food tasters checking everything I eat. Riker's been sweeping my quarters for poison. We're taking every precaution. But there are 1,000 ways to rig a ritual combat if you're creative enough." Seren finished feeding Lyra and settled her back in the cradle next to her brother. When she turned back, Kyle was watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. "What?" she asked. "I'm just memorizing this. You, here, with our children, in case—" "Don't." Seren crossed to him, placing her hand over his heart where the mate bond pulsed strong and steady. "You're going to win. You're going to survive. And then we're going to figure out how to actually build a life together." "I don't deserve you," Kyle said roughly. "Probably not." Seren's smile was wry. "But the goddess tied us together anyway, so I suppose we're both stuck with the situation." He caught her hand, pressing it more firmly against his chest. "If something goes wrong tomorrow, it won't. But if it does, I need you to know. The annulment has been drafted, signed by every council member except the Thorn representatives. If I die, Riker has instructions to force it through anyway. Our children will be recognized as my legitimate heirs. The throne will pass to them under your regency until they come of age. Kyle, and you'll be acknowledged as the true queen, not Maris. You." His other hand came up to cup her face. "Everything I have, everything I am, it all goes to you and Lyra and Ash. That's been formalized in royal decree. Cassian Thorn can't touch it." Seren's throat tightened. "I don't want your throne or your decrees. I want you alive." "Then I guess I'd better win." He leaned down, resting his forehead against hers. "Can I kiss you? I know I haven't earned—" Seren answered by pulling him down and pressing her lips to his. The kiss was desperate, almost painful in its intensity. Months of separation and fear and longing compressed into a single moment of contact. The mate bond flared between them, singing with recognition and need and the simple rightness of two souls finally reunited. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kael's eyes were blazing gold. "Tomorrow," he said hoarsely. "I win tomorrow, and then I'm never letting you go again. I'm going to hold you to that." The ritual combat was set for sunset in Ironvale's great arena, an ancient stone circle that had hosted challenges for 3,000 years. Seren was given a place of honor in the royal viewing box, the twins in their cradle beside her, surrounded by guards and priestesses. The arena was packed. Thousands of wolves filled the stone benches, and thousands more crowded around the perimeter, craning for a view. Representatives from every major pack occupied the formal seating sections, their banners and colors creating a patchwork of political allegiance. And in the center of the arena floor, two wolves faced each other. Kael in his black armor, looking every inch the Alpha King despite his exhaustion. And across from him, Garrett Bloodprice, a massive man covered in scars, his armor marked with the tally of his 17 kills. Lord Cassian Thorn presided over the proceedings from the opposite viewing box, his face a mask of cold confidence. Beside him sat Maris, looking uncomfortable but resigned. Elder Voss stepped into the arena's center, his voice magically amplified to carry across the crowd. "We gather to witness ritual combat in the old tradition," he announced. "Lord Cassian Thorn has challenged the annulment of his daughter's marriage to the Alpha King. The challenge will be settled by combat between champions. If the King's champion wins, House Thorn accepts the annulment and withdraws all opposition. If House Thorn's champion wins, The annulment is void and the marriage stands eternal. The crowd erupted in shouts and howls. Seren gripped the edge of her seat, her eyes locked on Kael. Through the bond, she sent, "Be smart. Be careful. Come back to us." "Always," he sent back. Elder Voss raised his hands for silence. "The combat will proceed until one champion yields, is incapacitated, or dies. There are no other rules. The moon goddess herself will judge the outcome." He paused. "Let the challenge begin." The two champions began to circle each other. Garrett struck first, a brutal overhead swing that would have cleaved Kael's skull if it had connected. But Kael wasn't there anymore, already moving, his combat training evident in every controlled motion. They fought with savage intensity, weapons clashing in a rhythm that echoed off the arena walls. Garrett was stronger, his blows hammering down with enough force to crack stone. But Kael was faster, more precise, his strikes finding gaps in his opponent's defense. 10 minutes into the fight, both champions were bleeding from multiple wounds. 20 minutes in, the arena floor was slick with blood. Seren watched with her heart in her throat, feeling every impact through the bond. The jarring shock when Garrett's blade connected with Kael's ribs. The burning pain when Kael took a shallow cut across his sword arm. "He's tiring," Kael sent through the bond. "The fight's going longer than he expected. Just need to outlast him." But then Garrett did something unexpected. He dropped his sword and shifted mid-combat, his human form exploding into a massive wolf that lunged straight for Kael's throat. The crowd gasped. Shifting during weapon combat was technically legal, but considered dishonorable. It threw off the balance of the fight entirely. Kael barely managed to roll aside, the wolf's fangs missing his jugular by inches. He scrambled to his feet, sword still in hand, facing a fully shifted opponent. "Shift!" someone in the crowd shouted. "Match him!" But Kael couldn't shift. Not while holding the blessed silver blade that was his only advantage. If he shifted, he'd be fighting fang to fang against a wolf known for tearing out throats. Garrett circled, looking for an opening. Then he lunged again. And Seren felt it through the bond. Kael's leg buckled. Just for a second, just the slightest hesitation. He'd been poisoned. Not enough to kill, not enough to be obvious. Just enough to weaken him at the crucial moment. "Cassian," Kael sent through the bond, his mental voice tight with pain and rage. "He poisoned my water before the fight." Garrett's fangs caught Kael's shoulder, tearing through armor and flesh. Kael went down hard, his sword skittering across the arena floor. The crowd erupted in chaos, some shouting encouragement, others screaming protests about honor and fairness. Seren was on her feet before conscious thought, leaning over the viewing box railing. "He's been poisoned! Thorn cheated!" But her voice was lost in the noise, and even if anyone heard, the ritual combat laws were absolute. Once begun, the fight continued until there was a victor. In the arena, Garrett stood over Kael's fallen form, jaws open for the killing strike. And Seren made a decision that would change everything. She vaulted over the viewing box railing. The drop was 20 feet, but she landed in a crouch, her body moving on instinct and the remnants of magic the priestesses had woven into her. She hit the arena floor and ran, putting herself between the massive wolf and her fallen mate. "Stop!" she screamed. Garrett hesitated, confused by the sudden appearance of a woman in the combat ring. The arena fell silent, thousands of wolves staring in shock at the scene unfolding before them. "This combat is void!" Seren's voice rang out clear and strong. "House Thorn has violated the sacred rules. They poisoned the Alpha King before the fight." "Lies!" Cassian shouted from his viewing box. "The woman is desperate, making false accusations." "Test him," Seren demanded, turning to face Elder Voss. "Test Kyle's blood for poison. The truth will speak for itself." Behind her, Kyle struggled to his feet, one hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder. Through the bond, she felt his shock and fierce pride. "What are you doing?" he sent. "Saving you," she sent back, "like you saved me." Elder Voss looked between Seren, Kael, and the thorn viewing box. His ancient face was unreadable. "The challenge stands," Cassian started. "The challenge is interrupted by formal accusation of dishonor," Elder Voss cut him off, "which under the old laws requires immediate investigation." He gestured to the arena healers. "Test the Alpha King's blood. Now." The healers rushed forward. One of them took a small sample from Kael's shoulder wound, mixed it with a testing reagent, and held up the vial. It turned black. Silverweed poison, the healer announced, designed to weaken wolf healing and slow reflexes, recently ingested, probably within the last hour. The crowd erupted. Shouts of outrage, calls for Thorn's head, wolves howling their fury at the dishonor. Cassian Thorn's face went white. "I had nothing to do with your champion fights for your honor," Elder Voss said coldly. "Under ritual law, any dishonor in the challenge reflects on the house that issued it." He turned to the crowd. "House Thorn has violated sacred combat. The challenge is void. The annulment stands." "No!" Cassian was on his feet. "I demand a rechallenge. This is... You demand nothing." The voice that cut through the arena was female, commanding, and utterly unexpected. Maris Thorn stood, looking at her father with cold contempt. "This ends now," she said. "Father, you've brought enough shame on our house. The political marriage was your ambition, not mine. I never wanted to be queen to a man who loves another." She turned to face the crowd. "I, Maris Thorn, formally accept the annulment. The marriage to Alpha King Kael Draven is dissolved by mutual acknowledgement of fraud and duress. I claim no rights to the throne, the title, or any future considerations." Cassian looked like he'd been struck. "Maris, you can't." "I just did." She met Kael's eyes across the arena. "I'm sorry, for all of it. I didn't know about the poison, about any of it, until it was too late. But I won't let my family's ambition destroy what's left of our honor." She descended from the viewing box and walked across the arena floor, stopping in front of Seren. Up close, she was beautiful, warrior strong, with eyes that held both intelligence and regret. "You're the true mate," Maris said quietly. "I am," Seren confirmed. "Then you're braver than I am. I could never have survived what you did." Maris glanced at the viewing box where the twins' cradle was visible. "Your children, they're really goddess-blessed?" "According to the sanctuary priestesses, yes," Maris nodded slowly. "Then maybe this was always meant to happen. Maybe the goddess had a plan none of us could see." She stepped back and raised her voice to Carrie. "I acknowledge Seren Vale as the true mate and rightful queen. I acknowledge her children as legitimate heirs to the throne, and I ask the assembled packs to do the same." For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then one of the frontier pack leaders stood. "The exiles acknowledge the true queen." Another pack leader rose. "The western ranges acknowledge the heirs." Like dominoes falling, pack after pack stood and voiced their acknowledgement. The northern territories, the coastal packs, the mountain wolves, even the merchant guilds who'd backed Maris for economic reasons. Within minutes, every major pack in the realm had formally recognized Seren and her children. Elder Voss stepped forward, his ancient voice carrying the weight of tradition. "By the will of the packs, by the blessing of the moon goddess, and by the laws of our people, Seren Vale is acknowledged as true mate to Alpha King Kael Draven. Her children are recognized as legitimate heirs. The political marriage is dissolved." He paused. "Does anyone challenge this decree?" Silence. Even Cassian Thorn had slumped in his seat, defeated and knowing that any further challenge would only bring down more consequences on his house. "Then let it be recorded," Elder Voss declared. "The Alpha King's true mate has been found. The kingdom is whole again." The crowd erupted in celebration, howls and cheers that shook the arena stones. Kael turned to Seren, and despite his injuries, despite the poison still working through his system, he smiled with such pure joy that it took her breath away. "You just claimed the throne in front of the entire realm," he said. "Someone had to save your stubborn hide," Seren replied. "I figured it might as well be me." He pulled her close despite the blood and the watching thousands, pressing his forehead to hers. "My queen." "Your mate," she corrected. "Queen is just a title. Mate is what matters." Through the bond, his love washed over her like sunrise. Brilliant, warm, absolutely unshakable. 3 weeks later, Seren stood in the great hall of Iron Vale's palace, wearing ceremonial robes that had been altered to fit her still-recovering body. Kael stood beside her, fully healed from both the poison and his combat injuries. And in 2 cradles placed on a dais before the throne, Lyra and Ash slept peacefully despite the massive crowd assembled to witness their formal presentation to the realm. "People of the wolf packs," Elder Voss announced, "we gather to complete what was broken months ago, to seal the bond that should have been acknowledged from the beginning, to crown not just a king, but a true mated pair." The ceremony was beautiful in its ancient simplicity. Kael and Seren stood before the assembled packs and pledged themselves to each other with words older than Ironvale itself, vows about protecting, providing, standing together against whatever storms might come. When Elder Voss placed the queen's crown on Seren's head, a delicate circlet of silver woven to look like moonlight, the entire hall erupted in celebration. Afterward, during the feast, Seren found herself surrounded by wolves who traveled from every corner of the realm to witness the coronation. They wanted to meet her, to see the twins, to hear the story of how a frontier healer had become their queen. She told them the truth, not the sanitized political version, but the real story. The betrayal, the flight, the months of survival, the desperate climb to the sanctuary. The moment she jumped into the arena to save Kael's life. And when she finished, the old exile wolf who'd helped her at Red Hollow raised his glass in a toast. "To the queen who refused to run," he said, "and to the healer who became the most dangerous woman in the realm." The crowd drank, and Seren felt tears prick her eyes. She'd started this journey as nothing, a secret shame, a hidden mistake, a woman with no power and no place. Now she stood as queen, with a kingdom at her feet and a mate who would rather die than lose her again. Late that night, after the last guests had departed and the twins were settled in the royal nursery with a dozen guards watching over them, Seren and Kael finally had a moment alone. They stood on the palace balcony overlooking Ironvale, the city lights spreading below them like a blanket of stars. "Do you regret it?" Kael asked quietly. "Everything you went through to get here?" Seren thought about the months of pain and fear, the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, the moments she'd been certain she wouldn't survive. Then she looked at the nursery window where Lyra and Ash slept peacefully, protected by more guards and magic than any infants in history. "No," she said finally, "because it made me strong enough to be the queen they need, the queen you need." She turned to face him. "I'm not the same woman you met in that forest. I'm not that naive healer who believed in fairy tale endings." "No," Kael agreed. "You're so much more." He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her with the fierce protectiveness that had driven him half-mad searching for her. "You're the woman who survived impossible odds, who climbed a sacred mountain while pregnant, who jumped into a combat arena to save my life." He kissed her forehead. "You're the woman the frontier packs pledged to follow. The woman the sanctuary priestesses blessed. The woman who became queen not because I gave you a crown, but because you earned it through blood and courage and sheer stubborn will." "That's a lot to live up to," Seren said wryly. "Good thing you're exceptional, then." She laughed, and the sound was free and real, and utterly without the shadows that had haunted her for months. Below them, Ironvale settled into peaceful night. The kingdom that had nearly torn itself apart was whole again, united not by politics or power, but by the simple truth of a mate bond that had refused to break no matter how much pressure was applied. "What do we do now?" Seren asked. "We've got the throne, the acknowledgement, the political stability. What comes next?" Kael smiled against her hair. "Now? Now we raise our children. We rebuild what was broken. We prove that a true mate bond can be stronger than any political alliance." He paused. "And we live, actually live together without running or hiding or fighting for survival." "That sounds," Seren searched for the word, "almost boring. After everything we've been through, I think boring sounds perfect." They stood together in the darkness, two souls bound by magic and choice, looking out over a kingdom that had finally accepted that some bonds couldn't be broken by politics or poison or time. And in the nursery, Lyra stirred in her sleep and made a small sound, not quite a cry, just a murmur of baby dreams. Kael tensed, already moving to check on her, but Ash's tiny hand had found his sister's, and both twins settled back into peaceful sleep. Even at barely a month old, they were already learning what their parents had fought so hard to prove, that together, bonded by something deeper than blood or law, they were unbreakable. The legend would spread across the realm in the years to come. The story of the Alpha King who nearly destroyed his kingdom searching for the mate he'd lost, and the healer who became the most powerful queen the wolves had ever known. But for Seren and Kael, standing together on that balcony while their children slept safe and protected, the legend didn't matter. What mattered was the present, the warmth of Kael's arms around her, the mate bond humming with contentment in her chest, the future stretching ahead, unknown, probably difficult, but theirs to build together. "I love you," Kael whispered into her hair. "I should have said it months ago, should have fought harder to make you believe it, but I'm saying it now. I love you, Seren. My mate, my queen, my everything." "I love you too," Seren replied. "Even though you're a stubborn, politically complicated disaster of a man who broke my heart and then spent months proving you'd do anything to fix it." Is that a yes to forever? That's a yes to taking it one day at a time and seeing what forever looks like when we actually get there. Kael laughed, the sound rich and real and full of the kind of hope that had seemed impossible just weeks ago. And in the city below, wolves who'd witnessed the coronation told their children about what they'd seen, about the true mate who'd refused to stay hidden, about the Alpha King who'd chosen love over politics, about the twins who'd been blessed by the moon goddess herself. The story would change over time, gaining mythic weight and legendary proportions. But the truth, the simple, beautiful truth, was this. Two souls had found each other despite impossible odds. They'd survived betrayal, separation, and attempts to destroy what bound them. And in the end, they'd proven that some bonds were stronger than kingdoms. That love, when it was true and fierce and absolutely refused to quit, could remake the world. And that sometimes the outcast healer and the desperate king could build something better than either of them had dreamed possible. Together, always together.